Sort of Coming Chapter 957. Spring is the first year of the year. There is the beginning of all things, the meaning of all rebirth. It is not only the beginning of the 4 o'clock, but also the first of a year old. When Qin Pingon returned to the Demon Tower of Tongyi's Hao Town from the Solar Term Courtyard on the top of Mount Sui, the most sage master and the Daoist pure yang were no longer visible. Only Xiao Mo, who was left with a yellow hat, blue shoes and green bamboo sticks, was standing in the corridor on the top floor with Qing Tong in a green robe. Qin Pingon put that night tour back on his back, ready to go home. This time he went out for a long trip, from leaving Xindu Mountain with Xiaomo, entering the town demon building, and stepping into Zhou Xian secretly instructed Qing Tong personally. There are 12 phantom worlds laid out, and dozens of landscape temples in that dream. In the Fen Shrine within the territory of Mengliang country, you meet Lu Qin again and then join together to board the Huangliang Pai Lu Mountain. Compared with all my previous travels, the time lapsed according to the real scale actually took a short time, but if you count the landscape journey in the 12 pictures, plus the mental journey, it can be said to be like a world away. Qing Tong saw the young hidden official who was in the dust and he stopped talking. Of course he wanted to participate in the next festival on Xindu Mountain, but he couldn't tell for a while. In fact, Qing Tong had already made up his mind and had to hug him. Xian Dushan's thigh, Qin Pingon must not be allowed to run like this tonight. For a scholar who can ring the spring festival drum for the saint after a lapse of thousands of years, in Qing Tong's view, it is not so important whether he is a closed disciple in the same line of Wensheng. Qing Tong even guessed that as long as Qin Pingon himself is willing to work hard in this direction, he will be the deputy head of the Confucian temple in the future, even if he is already in his pocket. Qin Pingon looked at Qing Tong, who wanted to speak but stopped talking several times, and asked with a smile, "Senior Qing Tong, do you have something to say?" Qing Tong smiled awkwardly and gave up a bit. The other party no longer calls his name directly, and he is not even a young fellow. Obviously I was going to cross the river to demolish the bridge, and to draw a clear line between myself and the town demon building. It's a long journey with Qin Pingon. He has been with this young hermit who once mistakenly thought he was Jing Juzhong of Baidi City for a long time. Qing Tong feels that he has some insightful skills. Smell the strings to know the elegance. Xiao Mo couldn't stand Qing Tong's chirps and delayed his son's journey and said straightforwardly, "My son Qing Tong wants to participate in Xindu Mountain's next sect celebration." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Small things, trivial things, just attending the ceremony. Fellow Daoists, don't think too much. I just don't think Xian Dushan did not send out invitations. Yuli is not in harmony and I am worried that I will be slow to treat fellow Daoists." Qing Tong quickly coughed and signaled Xiao Mo to say everything. "Don't be so muddled. This trip to the mountains and rivers, there is no credit and hard work. You Xindu Mountain, how should you give a chief as a dang? Besides, a great cultivator in the ascended realm, not to mention the host of half of Tongyi's Hao, actually needs to ask others to serve as a sect, guess Qing, and it is a big joke to spread out." Xiao Mo said, "Qing Tong still wants to serve as the honorable guest of Qingping Sword Sect or as a guest of honor, so I just chatted and wanted me to help with a few words. I said that this might involve adding a seat to the next ancestor. I'm just a memorial service for the chair of the chair. Of course, if it doesn't count, the son has to decide whether it will succeed or not. What's more, it's not easy for us to say anything about it." Qin Pingon suddenly thought for a moment, nodded and said, "Qing Tong, you are willing to condescend to take the initiative to attend the ceremony, and then be a named honorary guest. Of course Xindu Mountain will be splendid because of this, which is really a good thing. But Xiaomo, I really didn't deliberately lie to you. When I came to the next business, I had an agreement with student Cui Dongshan, almost never intervening, and handed it over to Cui Dongshan. On the side of Shangzong's Luopa Mountain, I held discussions at the Patriarch's Hall. I blamed myself for being unreliable. I was a mountain lord for so many years. Because I was used to being a shopkeeper who couldn't see people, I was not on the mountain all the year round. Well, for many things they deliberately stunned me and sang the opposite." Xiao Mo immediately followed his words. "So I didn't seem to believe it when I saw Qing Tong before, so I gave a ready-made example. The proud student of the Son of the Year and now the First Lord of Xindu Mountain, Cui Xianxia, pledged to recommend the old Lord Jiang. Serving as the chief worshipper of Luopa Mountain is not a small objection. The process is quite tortuous. I heard from Zhou Hufa. At that time there were quarrels in the Patriarch Hall of the Jisa Peak. Chief Mountain. Qing Tong said sternly, If it's really embarrassing, just pretend that I didn't mention it. Love it, I really don't serve it anymore. Qin Pingan smiled, and he was with me. He really wasn't used to you. Xiao Mo reminded him in his heart. Before the sun was traveling far away, Qing Tong emptied several houses for many years, and depending on the posture he was going to use it as a celebration gift. Qin Pingan glared at Xiao Mo. You can't tell me about this kind of thing right away? Master Yingguan immediately raised the ending and prolonged a sigh. The fellow Daoist is still talking angry. Don't be like that. Based on the friendship between me and fellow Daoist, the word friends of Daoist is simply a measure for the three of us. The statement made by the body is public for private and sentimental for reason. Xiao Mo and I should strongly recommend 1 or 2 for you to get a chair in the Qingping Peak Patriarch Hall. Qing Tong nodded. Seems to be still in anger. Before leaving the Jinyao Tower, Qin Pingan suddenly smiled and said, Qing Tong, don't talk about anything else, just talk about friends of the Taoist. My fellow friends, I'm very sincere and sincere. Qing Tong nodded and said, I only believe this sentence. Xiao Mo glanced at his son. Qin Pingan nodded quietly, understanding. This young fellow Daoist is different now, and he is not a good deceiver. After Qin Pingan took the lead in twisting out the 3-mountain talisman, Qing Tong was quite surprised, but remained calm. Was it anxious to return to Xindu Mountain, or did it mean that Qin Pingan no longer needs to consume merits when he casts this great talisman? Relying on the Shudi mountains and rivers of the Sanshan talisman, in a few blinks of an eye he came to a mountain. Already in the boundary of Qingping Sword Sect, Xindu Yunzong Preservation, the 3 mountains stand side by side. It is a pattern of 1 main and 2 auxiliary. This place is the place where Chao Sunny retreats. Including Yunjing Mountain, the 2 mountains are still hidden by the formation. The 3 mountains were once the old mountain relics of Tongyi's Hao. The main peaks of the 2 mountains are respectively erected on the top of the mountain with a stele, which is carved by Cui Dongshan, I can't leave the Chao, and Heaven and Earth Purple Qi. Qin Pingan with a green shirt and a sword, Xiaomo with a yellow hat, blue shoes and green bamboo sticks, a green robe and a handsome youth. There are green bamboo forests in the mountains, the wind shakes the bamboo forests and the mountains are full of rime. The 3 of them walked along the water. The stream among the bamboo forests was gurgling, and there were stones above the water, and the clusters of prosperous pods were verdant and lovely. In the water there are many small ponds formed by the accumulation of gravel, and the water in Shihong is especially clear, deep and full of fish, suddenly up and down. There are many bamboo clumps on both sides of the stream, and the chaotic rocks under the bamboo clumps are like teeth, reflecting the water like cows and horses drinking in the stream. Qin Pingan smiled and introduced, the main peak of Yunzing Mountain elsewhere Wu Chaofeng will be the dojo of Cui Dongshan, the next sect master. He also serves as the first mountain lord of Yunzingshan. Next, except for the abbot. In a specific matter there will be a wide range of disciples, Taoju, swordsmanship, boxing, talisman, alchemy, formations, economics, etc., will be divided into categories, and each disciple will be collected. When Ping Feng discusses matters, Cui Dongshan will also propose that among the young genealogical monks who will become Qingping Sword Sect in the future, the first sword repairman who has reached the Jade Pure Realm can take over my Chaofeng as the second mountain lord. And the Jingxing Peak under our feet, not the entire Premio Mountain, will be temporarily handed over to Chao Qingqing, who is here to retreat in Jedon, because Chao Qingqing is the first monk of Jing Xingfeng. He will also it is the next suzerain who has no suspense. This matter, the upper and lower cases, has long been known. Then Qingping Jianzong has an additional tradition, which is an unwritten rule. Since the second suzerain Chao Qingqi, the third and all next suzerains will be Jing Xingfeng's peak master origin. For this we obviously borrowed from Yuguazong's Jiuifeng. Since the sect's name is Qingping Jianzong, then of course it is based on Kendo. The Xindu Mountain, which is the ancestral mountain, is the home of future swordsmanship. Yunjing Mountain may be responsible for accepting pure martial arts, except for Cui Dongshan. Xiazong also have a kind of master as well as the right side of Sui Xianfeng. Plus we have a very good relationship with Pushan teaching boxing. The problem is not big. On the side of Shimiation all scholars are practicing qi. Maybe there will be some. In fact, Qing Tong was not very interested in these sect affairs. Hearing Qin Ping's talk around him, it fell in his ears. That is, the stream flowed slowly and he didn't care about it. However, it is not a trivial matter when it comes to the inheritance of a sect and the hereditary secret method. It is not a trivial matter to put it in any hilltop fairy house. It is just that Qingping Ganyan is light and light at the moment. In fact, it is a genealogy of the future Qingping sword sect. For the monk, it may be countless love, hatred, and ups and downs of people's hearts. So Qin Pingon did not regard him as an outsider. Xiao Mo smiled and said, "My fellow Daoist fellow, I have heard many things for the first time, so don't be so absent-minded." Qing Tong looked helpless, but Mianli hid the needle. "I can't take out this booklet and write down these words one by one." Xiao Mo smiled and said, "I built a dojo at the foot of Xiandu Mountain, a place just named Luobaotan. I believe that I will inevitably worship Qing Tong or Qing Tong Kiching in the future, and I often greet the past." Qing Tong's face was stiff. Qin Pingon asked coldly, "For so many years have you not recruited a few disciples who taught Taoism or martial arts? After all, Qing Tong is equal to half the Ascended Realm monk, who is equal to half a boundless warrior. Moreover, Qing Tong's temperament that he often visits the lotus roots and blessed land does not seem like a person who likes to have a deserted life." Qing Tong shook his head and said with a face, "I never did. The main reason is that he is responsible for sitting in the demon tower, and his responsibilities are too special. Qing Tong dares to accept disciples casually, worrying that he will be embarrassed. And the old master of the East China Sea, the master of Bixiadong, has also been rudely. I have beaten Qing Tong, saying that Qing Tong is not the piece of material that can establish sex on his own. Facts have proved that Qing Tong has been cautiously sailing the ship for 10,000 years. Only the disaster in the Taiping Mountain is the best lesson for us. The Jinyao Tower is very likely to be reduced to a similar situation. Moreover, Qing Tong feels that once he has a disciple, he will definitely be unable to stop accepting disciples. It is similar to the collection of houses in the town demon building. Qing Tong never looks at the appearance or the degree of rarity. Just look at the fate, then the arrival of the closed disciple will definitely be indefinitely. Qin Pingon said with emotion, "The young fellow Daoists are really seeking the truth with all their heart, making others feel ashamed." Qing Tong hesitated again and stopped. Because the reason why he would brazenly climb the relationship with Xiandu Mountain is because the situation has changed today, and Qing Tongxin's mind has changed accordingly, and he really wants to find a first-generation ancestor of the XX sect. Qin Pingon seemed to see through Qing Tong's thoughts and said, "I will return to my life after I retreat. I will travel to Haoran with my friends during the retreat. Then see if you can be allowed to start a sect in a place in the middle of Tongyi's Hao, near the demon building of the town, and strive to allow the local monster monks on the side of Tongyi's Hao to join your sect, and save them from rumbling all year round. Dao heart is lost and there is no intention to practice. Over time, this group of monster monks who have been resentful will have some hidden dangers in Tongyi's Hao. Qing Tong, you took the initiative to follow us to Qingping Sword Sect. You have selfishness. I brought you to this Jingxing Peak. Actually, you also have selfishness." Qing Tong wondered, "What do you mean?" Qin Pingon walked along the bamboo path with his arms folded. "Those who are far-sighted and cautious can do great things. People who are loyal and honest can count on great things. In my opinion, the existence of fellow Daoists can be completely aside from the Jinyao Tower. It is the fourth mountain besides Qingping Sword Sect, Immortal Capital, Yunzheng, and Preservation. The young fellow Daoist may not be an outstanding ancestor of the sect, but he will definitely be an extremely responsible and dedicated guardian." Xiaomo was surprised. Saying 3 extreme characters in one breath, is Qing Tong really worthy of this evaluation? The words of my son didn't have any meaning, so he put all the meanings on the table directly, hoping that Qing Tong could become the guardian behind the Qingping Sword Sect, at least one of them. Qing Tong was even more surprised, smiling bitterly, and laughed at himself. "Even if you say it honestly, I don't believe it myself." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "You can believe in this matter because I have come here step by step. You can rest assured that fellow Daoists don't worry about falling into a nest of right and wrong. I will talk to Cui Dongshan in advance and promise that you will not be involved in any sect affairs because of your realm and identity. So you only need to, as a half-a foreigner, pay more attention to the development trend of Qingping Jinzong year after year. As long as there is something wrong, even if you can't tell what is wrong, you can talk to Cui Dongshan or the second suzerain in the future." Chao Yingqing took the initiative to put it forward, without worrying about whether his views are right or wrong. Qing Tong nodded. "I only promise to do my best. I will not make any other promises." Qin Pingon smiled and said, Then it's a deal. The group walked to the top of Jingxing Peak. The sky was clear and the sky was clear. The mountains were blue and the moon was white. They looked around, relaxed and happy. Because of Lu Chen's evaluation, he described the inscription as some kind of immortal slough. So Qin Pingon took another look at the stone tablet this time. A young man in Confucian shirt walked out of the stone room quickly and said, "Sir, a stranger." Sure enough, as Lu Chen had expected, Chao Qingqing's Jin Dan had a rank between the first and second ranks. The first grade of Danqing is a soaring aptitude such as Wei Shi from Ai Aizhou in his early years, and Yao Qing from Qingming world. But in fact, many of the great monks standing on the top of the world are mostly the second grade of Danqing. Qin Pingon smiled comfortedly. It's above the second grade of Danqing. It's great. It's much stronger than that of Mr. Pill that year. Then Qin Pingon began to introduce the Qing Tong around him. This fellow Taoist, the Taoist named Qingtong, is a native monk from Tonggishao who has ascended to the realm. Because of the Taoist name, it is in the name of our Qingping sword sect. The word green, fellow Daoists of Qing thinks it is a rare fate, and I have been invited several times so they will serve as the name worship of Qingping sword sect. Chao Qingqing saluted again. Junior Chao Sunny, I have met Senior Qing Tong. Qing Tong nodded in greeting, smiled and slandered in his heart. The hidden officer really came here with his mouth open. Qin Pingon said, the realm and qualifications of the fellow Daoists are clearly laid out over there. Just because Mi Yu is the predecessor of the predecessor, the fellow Daoists can only be second. Qing Tong was speechless. Is this the second consecration? Isn't this all very convincing? Chao Qingqing smiled kindly and said, after all, we Qingping sword sect is still a kendo sect, so we can only wrong the seniors of Qingping. Qing Tong smiled and said, it's not about grievances, it's an honor to be associated with Qingping Jianzong. I dare not feel aggrieved at all. What's more, Xiaomo next to him, an ascended realm perfect sword repairer, is now not only a named worship of the fallen mountain, he is not as good as himself. So far he has not had a second place. A young man dressed in white with a mole on his eyebrows rushed to the wind. When his figure was swaying and falling, his two snow-white sleeves were hunting and screaming, and he said, see you, mister. As soon as Cui Dongshan got up, there was a young woman with a ball in a bun, and a girl in black came to Jing Xingfeng. It turned out that after Cui Dongshan noticed the trail of the husband and his party, he knocked on the door and asked the master sister Pei Qian to call on the millet who had stayed up all night in the house to watch for the years. Millet was very excited and reported the good news. Good man, Mountain Lord, Yumi has broken the border, is the well-deserved, well-known, genuine Mi Deijian fairy. Qin Pingon deliberately showed an unexpected look on his face and exclaimed, awesome. Qing Tong's heart moved slightly. The meter of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the first chief worshipper of Xiandu Mountain, turned out to be a fairyland sword repairer. Qin Pingon bent over and rubbed the head of the millet grains. Do you often guard the gate for me, Deijiangxian? Xiao Mili grinned and said, what the hell, occasionally. Millet Grains stretched out his hand to block his mouth and whispered to the good man mountain owner. Yumi said, the process of retreat can be dangerous or dangerous. That is, whenever the Taoist heart is unstable, I often think of the imminent danger of the hermit on the battlefield. The chaos, the heart is settled, and this is the chance to break through, so Yumi told me repeatedly that this time I can break the bottleneck and live out of the customs. In addition to sincere thanks to Sect Master Lu of the Taihui Sword Sect, most of the credit is left. All it has nothing to do with his own cultivation base, jianxin or a coin. Qin Pingon laughed angrily, blurted out and said, fuck his mother's ass. Millet scratched his face. Qin Pingon immediately became happy with Yen Yu. Leave him alone, let's go back to Mi Xiefeng. Qing Tong was silent. As for the atmosphere of Luopa Mountain, because Qin Pingon chose to go through the house instead of entering in his dream, Qing Tong has never been able to personally experience one or two. However, Xiao Mo's words and deeds have made Qing Tong mentally prepared. But from the current situation, it seems that it is still not enough. Qin Pingon helped introduce Qing Tong again. After that, there were two more figures. They came from the ghost city in the Great Yuan dynasty. They were Zhong Kuei and the ghost fairy Yujin, who called himself Gusu. Qin Pingon had to introduce the identity of Qing Tong again. But ignoring the realm of Xingyao Tower and Qing Tong, I didn't believe in Zhong Kuei, but in the fat man who looked greasy, an emperor who almost completed the feat of one continent and one country earlier than the Dali Song family. Shu, the so-called husband with a blade, cut down 1,000,000 heads, is not an exaggeration. Zhong Kui glanced at Qin Pingon. Qin Pingon nodded. Zhong Kui secretly gave a thumbs up. Qin Pingon also gave Zhong Kui a thumbs up. Meeting is not against the heart, only without saying. Not bad. Because two friends are like one who is responsible for opening the road, and the other is responsible for helping protect the road. Qin Pingon also witnessed some kind of invincible posture of Zhong Kui on the way to the ghost road. It is not easy to open a road, but it is even more difficult to protect the road. In the entire northwest boundary of Tonghishao, Zhong Kui was almost entirely on his own, using a magnificent method similar to that of Bai Yes sword-making thousands in Fuyaozhou. His body transformed into countless roads, helping countless ghosts. Yinling guides the way forward while resisting the wind between the heavens and the earth, forcibly suppressing the immortal mansion practitioners and various landscape gods along the way, and the innate suppression of the lonely souls and wild ghosts, and escorting them into the fans leading to the underworld. Inside the gate, that was definitely a feat that no ascended realm cultivator could accomplish. At the same time, Zhong Kui also took a trip to Huangquan Road in person. He directly issued a series of decrees without seeing the Honorable Fujuan of Fengdu, strictly ordering the underlings, ghosts and numerous Tatao horse faces on the road. It's not allowed to flog any of the inbound ghosts without authorization. The key is that the entire position is transcendent, and it can even ignore the Confucian temple by Yujing's etiquette and rules and the Taoist decree. It seems that there is no objection to this, which is equivalent to tacitly acquiescing to Zhong Kui's overstepping. Therefore, in the middle of the night when the old and the new alternate, it may be destined to be a sleepless night for all the cultivators of Tonghishao, the three Confucian academies, the emperors and generals of various countries, and the gods of mountains and rivers. In fact, when Zhong Kui left, he even took the fat man Eugene, followed by a trip to the far gate, so that Eugene's aura of heaven and earth was exhausted. For Gixian Eugene, it is a special kind of protection. When he returned to the ruined ghost town where there was no lonely ghost, the fat man collapsed on the ground with exhaustion. An exhausted fat man lying on the ground only said something from the bottom of his heart and slightly mocked himself. I never thought that in my life, besides killing, I would do this kind of thing. The fat man who was brought to Xindu Mountain by Zhong Kui was still chattering on the road when he came here, complaining that Zhong Kui didn't know that he was distressed. But the donkey who had his head scratched, he was exhausted to death. Only when Eugene came to Jing Xingfeng he felt that the trip was worthwhile, and his eyes lit up because he saw the beautiful woman in a green robe. The fat man admired Qin Pingon from the bottom of his heart. Huang Ting Yi Yunyun, plus the unclear relationship between Her Majesty De Quan, all of them were great beauties. It's too shameful to be drunk with flowers and grass. While Qin Pingon was chatting with Zhong Kui there, Fatty Pidian moved towards the fairy sister. Xiaxing's surname is Yu and his name is Gusu, and he is a close friend of Qin Shanzhu. I don't know the girl except for the name of Qing Tong. The surname is very famous. Where is your ancestral home where you live now? But there is a teacher's hilltop. The niche likes to travel in the mountains and water, and is willing to go down the mountain with Qing Tong's sister after the ceremony, and meet the elders by the way. Qing Tong is actually reluctant to talk to this ghost. Because Eugene was wandering around Tonghishao with Zhong Kui before, Qing Tong glanced at the master and servant, and knew Eugene very well. As for being mistaken for a female nun by the fat man, Qing Tong didn't have any complaints. Eugene smiled and said, "You are not talented, but I just happen to have a poem and I have a bit of experience. For example, I saw a girl beautiful as a scroll, just like a Tongyin lady. Xiaoli in the moon there will be wind over Wu Yelishengliang's words are sent out with feeling. I'm afraid of scaring the girl when I say it, I don't know it. Xiaoxing is actually a ghost, but the girl should not be sad about it. When Xiaoxing was alive he once wrote tens of thousands of poems, but now he has changed his course. I turned to the poem and when I saw the girl's elegance, he was a person in the woods who were good at this. For example, Xiaoxing wrote a lyrics recently, there is the melting moon, the light breeze, and the catkins are next to the pear flowers. It's just that I always feel that this is the place in this sentence. The words are still unfinished and it seems difficult to call them the best. The girl agrees. Wouldn't it be better if it was replaced with a brush and the breeze was blowing in the face? Would it be better if it was replaced with a supportive support? Would it have the longest aftertaste? The young fellow was so annoyed that he could only sneer in his heart. Eugene, I have read some of your unsightly cheating poems. If you want to say that you are planning to usurp the throne and lead soldiers to fight, you are the best in the world, but when it comes to this kind of poetry and lyrics, you don't seem to be even stubborn. With a sad expression in Eugene's eyes, he glanced at Qin Pingon slantingly and said grimly, "Someone really has a lot of friendship with the young girl, so I can talk about everything." Cui Dongshan asked, "Sir, why don't you go to Mishua Peak to rest first, and half an hour before the celebration, I will let the millet grains notify Mr.?" Millet took a deep breath, nodded vigorously and clenched the hiking stick and golden shoulder in his hands. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Just take a nap and squint for a while." Cui Dongshan said, "Then I will go down the mountain with my husband and talk about something." After that, Chao Qingqing and the others returned to their homes at Mishua Peak in Xindu Mountain. Xiao Imo returned to Luobao Beach at the foot of the mountain alone, and Pei Qian would arrange Qingtong's residence. However, Qin Pingon left millet grains and accompanied Cui Dongshan on a walk down the mountain Xingfeng. Cui Dongshan does have a few things to discuss with her husband. The first thing is whether to excavate a brand new blasphemy in the middle of Tongyi's Hao. Previously it was on the side of the old General Yao Zhen's house and on the side of Pushen Yunkatang. Different from Aquarius, Tongyi's Hao has an old history, but time has passed. It has been cut to pieces by the dynasties, various small country cities and immortal mansions along the middle of the continent, and it is of little significance. The old is not as good as the new. Fortunately, there is a ready-made success rule that can be copied and applied, that is, Chidu of Aquarius, and this dadu was much more difficult to excavate in the past, and it is far greater than the old one of Tongyi's Hao. Otherwise, even if Qin Pingon and Qingping Jianzong of Xindu Mountain are one of the initiators and the real leader, they will inevitably have a few big quarrels, and there will inevitably be many fundamental differences. In addition, how many grains of rain money it will cost to build a dadu depends on how big the stall will be in the new dadu that has not been named yet. On the Daquan dynasty, it's obviously been planned for a long time, and now there is a rough prototype of dadu riverbed, but in the eyes of Cui Dongshan, there are too many places that need to be corrected, and they are not trivial things that only need outsiders to check and fill in the vacancies. Qin Pingon heard the general situation and asked, "You talked about this with the old generals earlier. Did you talk about a candidate who blasphemed against several high-level water gods? Because according to the rules of the Confucian Temple, dadu together means that Tongye Zong can create 3 more high-ranking water gods out of thin air. Only Gong Ho is at least 3 high-ranking water gods. If you say that in addition to the lead Xindu Mountain and Qingping Jianzong, plus the Yao family of the Daquan dynasty Pushan or the Taiping Mountain which is more than Huangting, all belong to the initiator. Then it was their forces who sat down, closed the door and divided up the 3 precious places early. Or open the door, attract as many countries and fairy sects as possible, and then list the most suitable water candidates, and take the initiative to give up 1 or even 2 of them. In fact, it is not a small problem. Some literati were accustomed to doing nothing but bad things. And it's not that you can get things done blindly and selflessly." Cui Dongshan blinked and said with a smile, "The students were in the old general's house before and everyone was talking about the matter. It's just because they were one by one at the time and what they saw before them were all urgent, and I was more worried about whether this matter was feasible. After all, whether we can make a good start, we still have to say Mr. is not present, we didn't have and we didn't dare to talk so far." Qin Pingon glared. Cui Dongshan made it clear that he was going to make his own husband work hard. Cui Dongshan chuckled and said, "On the side of the Daquan dynasty, our Bio Palace, where the goddess of the river is buried, will definitely occupy a place for the uncle Gong Ho." Qin Pingon said softly, "This matter depends on Lu Rao's own wishes. The bigger problem lies in the fact that dadu should not be too straight. Otherwise the water will rush into the sea and it will easily take away a continent of mountains and rivers. Along the way, ordinary dynasties and immortal mansions on the mountain cannot be retained, so every time the dadu river is straight, is countless complaints. However, it should not be too winding and twists and turns, otherwise it will easily hurt the transportation of the mountains. At the same time, this means that the cities and farms of many countries will inevitably be flooded by the waters of the Great Dunes, and the people along the way will move away from their homes. One thing is very likely to involve millions or even tens of millions of people. Therefore, every time a tortuous place is blasphemed, it will cause countless criticisms. In addition, dadu, in addition to the excavation of the riverbed, involves a large number of river diversions. Many mountains in the plains, especially in the basin, are very likely to become the old calendar. For the monarchs of the countries who have just restored the country in terms of these, they are all huge losses that are very close at hand, so the weighing of the pros and cons here still involves the extremely complicated and extremely complex disputes of interests in all aspects. In Aquarius, one country is one continent, so you don't have to worry about the pros and cons that are specific to each country. In addition, Dali officials are capable of government affairs and no one dares to hold back. How does Tonghishao compare? In the final analysis, there are two major problems: money and popular support. Qin Pingon looked helpless and said, "The most worry-free and labor-saving thing is to use the gods' money to buy the entire road that Dadu flows through. If you want to save worry and effort, you have to spend a lot of money and use enough money to fill the pit of people's hearts." Xiao Mili frowned his two faint brows and sighed. "Then how tall and big a mountain of money must be vacated?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "There may be only one person with this financial background, that is Lu Kaishan of AI Aizhou." Xiao Mili exclaimed, "That's too rich, but unfortunately I am not familiar with Lu Kaishan of AI Aizhou. When we met we couldn't speak." Cui Dongshan smiled and reached out and touched the head of the millet grain. The little girl hurriedly bowed her head and shook her head. The big white goose became more and more presumptuous. "Look, this hasn't become the sect master, so she's so courageous and fat." Qin Pingon said, "For specific matters, you represent Xianxia and are solely responsible. I only help take the lead, but don't feel wronged. First of all, let me come to the Temple of Confucianism and the Academy. Well, maybe in the future the Taoist Nin will also come to Tonghishao to help. One water and one mountain. Just talking about the cost of the relocation, they can already save an astronomical amount of fairy money. In addition, the town Yaolu Qingtong will also contribute. Qingtong served as the second consecration of our Qingping sword sect, so he will definitely not stand idly by." Cui Dongshan smiled and rubbed his hands. "Enough, too much. You have to learn, Mr. Shui, accept it when you see it and accept it when you see it." Qin Pingon said, "What else?" Cui Dongshan told the truth. It turned out that he planned to relocate more old 5 sacred mountains and Xianfu ruins, one after another, to take root in the Zhongmen realm. Many of these old mountain relics fell into the hands of the new reinstated monarchs, and they were tasteless, because the many new Wuxia mountain monarchs who were supported after the war were actually unwilling to open their mansions on the dilapidated old site. A bit unlucky, and those dilapidated hills, not to mention the fact that the mountains were ruined by the monks of the monster race, the surrounding heaven and earth's aura was swept away. It was just a big hole. The mountain king opened his mansion on the old hill. It is really a headache, and the country is restored. The latter emperor and monarch also had their own pragmatic considerations. Not only were they greedy for merit but for the sake of history. After all, not everyone had the opportunity to conjure the mountains in the past dynasties. The monarchs wanted to be prosperous, and the threshold was very high since ancient times. If you change the location of the mountain, you will not only be able to consolidate the Zen mountains, but also help a country's luck, saying goodbye to the old and welcoming the new, just like a new year in the city under the mountain. In this way, Cui Dongshan's family only talks about immortal money, not talking about the pile of natural treasures, and he may be lavishly squandered. So Qingping Jianzong's first sect master also means crying poorly. For the expenses of digging and blaspheming, we are really powerless in the next sect, and we can get people out. As for the money, we can only rely on the husband and the upper sect. Qin Pingon shook his sleeves and said with a smile, "I really accepted a good student, a proud disciple." No wonder Cui Dongshan deliberately let millet grains walk between the two, because he was worried about being beaten. The third thing is that no money is finally involved. It turned out that it was from the side of Yuguizong who took advantage of the opportunity of Luopashan to create the next sect, and took the initiative to show favor with Xianxia. He did not hesitate to let Jiu Yifeng's new peak master, the young sword repair Qiuji, personally come to Xindu Mountain to participate in the celebration. Qingping Jianzong, do you want to take advantage of the trend and form an alliance with Yuguizong? In fact, each has its pros and cons. Once the alliance is formally formed and the two sides conclude a contract on the mountain, it is equivalent to both sides agreeing to the future landscape of one continent on the mountain. Even if Xindu Mountain does not have such ambitions, at least Yuguizong is willing to unilaterally admit this, which is no small sincerity. If the two sides form an alliance, the previous peach and leaf alliance will become a piece of waste paper. However, if the two parties do not conclude an agreement, it is equivalent to the two sides invisibly drawn a road. using the Daquan dynasty, the Rin River etc. as the boundary, or the future Dadu as the border. Qingping Jianzong and Yuguazongjing, the water does not offend the river. Once a dispute arises in the future, since there is no incense, then it can only be done on business. Qin Pingon said, "You want to do this by yourself, I don't give any opinions or suggestions." Cui Dongshan didn't feel surprised either. He pinched his chin and looked sad. Qin Pingon didn't bother to take a look, who was pretending to show it bitterly. The last thing Cui Dongshan wants to confirm with his husband, what will happen in the next 100 years. Perhaps only this matter for Cui Dongshan and Xiazong is the most important top priority. Qin Pingon said, "First, retreat for a period of time, return to the Jade Realm, and then travel around the vast world, and you will visit several continents that you haven't been to." Zhuhai Dongtian opened a wine shop and did not charge rent, but the Most Holy Master personally promised it. And because of something that Aunt Feng confessed to Dali capital city, Qin Pingon had to take a trip to the Hundred Flowers land. As for being the princely guest of the blessed land, it would be avoided. Cui Dongshan asked tentatively, "Mr. is retreating on Mishue Peak, right?" Qin Pingon said, "I returned to Luopa Mountain and gave the Xiadongshan Taoist temple to the children of Chai Wu and King Sun Chun." Cui Dongshan stomped, "Millet, hurry up and help the little brother be fair." Millet shook his head, haha said with a smile, "I want to go home too." Cui Dongshan said sadly, "Our Xindu Mountain, isn't it the home of the right guardian?" Millet thought for a while and gave the answer in his mind, "I don't need to visit the mountain every day. She is clever. On the side of Xindu Mountain, the so-called patrolling of the mountains is that she finds something to do on her own. In Luopa Mountain it's different. From the old cook to Cistern Wanshu to the Taoist chief Xianwei at the gate of the mountain, and farther to the Qilong Alley on the other side of the town, everyone felt that patrolling the mountain, she is not a fool, she is a serious person to do well. Although it is a small matter without a big rice bowl, only Zhoumi is done." When Cui Dongshan heard the words of the millet grains, he knew that there was no room for mediation. If he dared to break a sentence, he would probably be trained on the side of the husband. Qin Pingon rubbed the head of the millet grains and asked Cui Dongshan, "How is the specific ranking arranged at the Patriarch Hall?" Regarding the next celebration and the specific process arrangements, Qin Pingon really didn't know in detail. Moreover, different hills have their own family law and rituals. It's too far away. I can't see, I can't reach it, I can't even think about it. When something really happens, it feels like dreaming again. Therefore, the previous ceremony for the creation of the sect of Luopa Mountain from beginning to end seemed so sloppy. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "Mr. As the lord of the upper sect, of course, there is no need for the abbot to worship the incense ceremony, and the incense is not needed. After all, the portrait of Xia Zongzu Shirtang hanging in the middle is the sect master Qin Pingon himself. How can there be a reason for oneself to respect incense? Of course, this is also because the establishment of Luopa Mountain and Qingping Sword sect, the upper sect and the lower sect, is one after another. At the beginning of the construction of the vast majority of the next sects in the world, the founder of the previous sect was not visible. They only saw hanging statues and no living people." Cui Dongshan continued, "Like the long-lived Daoist who is the law of the fallen mountain palm, as well as the old Jia who is the second manager of the wind and kite fairy, because they are all from the previous sect, there is still some difference from the guests. They will follow behind the husband. Before we set aside the genealogy members, we will first respect the incense. As for the position of the 2 rows of seats in the Qingping Peaks Patriarch Hall, there is no fixed rule for the 2 rows of seats on the mountain. According to Mr. S. rules when he went to Chunban's High on the Great Wall of Jianqi, it is better to respect the left. For example, the Dali Imperial Court means that the court officials respect the left, and the army respects the right. It's just that in the officialdom, promotion is called right shift, and demoted is called left shift, which is also interesting. The upper row on the left, the lower row on the right to show respect for the lower sect. Without the source of the upper sect, how come the river of the lower sect? But in the future, Qingpingfeng, if there are 2 meetings between the upper and lower parties, the seats will need to be changed. According to the general rules, the next Zongzu Shirtang will have a permanent seat except for you. Ming, the chief dedicated to Jiangshangzhen, will not arrange a fixed seat for them, because they are not members of Qingping Sword Sect's Patriarch Hall. Then Yao Xianji, Yi Yunyun and Huang Ting, these guests will first respect the incense as the guests. Wait until our first meeting of the Patriarch's Hall, and after they have the status of worship and guest, it will be the first time. Formally as my own family, I re-enter the Qingping Peak Patriarch Hall. Hey, walk out with your front foot, turn around and go back with your back foot. Cui Dongshan smiled and asked, Sir, just ask, what is the arrangement for the position of the hanging statue in the Zongzi? Qin Pingon said in a huff, who is the next sect master who is going to have a headache? Cui Dongshan took out a few pieces of paper from his sleeve. Please check these lists, sir. 3 sheets of paper. In fact, it's just a play. The genealogical members of the entire next clan, and the members of Qingping Sword Sect's Patriarch Hall, who have seats in Qingping Peak Patriarch Hall, and their respective specific positions in Qingping Sword Sect. The last is to observe the guest. Qin Pingon still took over, looked at it carefully and saw the 2 names on the last piece of paper and wondered, why are Lu Jubao and Yu Panshui also on the list? Cui Dongshan smiled and said, in the case of Dadu, my husband intends to bring the Lu family and the Xuanmi dynasty to the Iazhao Island. How foolish is the money? Qin Pingon frowned slightly. Cui Dongshan immediately said sternly, Mr. Don't worry, they are here. They are only responsible for paying the money in advance and sharing the accounts afterwards. They are not allowed to use the excavation and blasphemy to secretly prop up the puppet temple and the fairy mansion mountain on Tongyi's Hao. It is just that. For this kind of thing, signing a paper contract is actually not very useful. Instead, it requires a gentleman's agreement. Speaking of this, Cui Dongshan began to move sideways. Students have a fart prestige and card face. Of course not, absolutely not. So the husband has to go on the horse himself. With a smile on his face, Qin Pingon turned his head and waved to the proud student. Before they knew it, the 3 of them had already reached the foot of Mt. Qin Pingon raised his head and looked at Xindu Mountain, the next sect of Luopa Mountain and the gate of Qingping Peak. The couplets presented by Wu Shuangjiang will be hung, which is a real treasure of Zhengshan. Every word on the couplet is a place of endless rhyme and unity. Before the break, Qin Pingon planned to go to Mishue Peak and meet Zhang Shanfeng first. And Zhang Shanfeng Sr., referring to Xianfeng Yuan Lingdian, is actually a famous guest of his own Luopa Mountain. Let Cui Dongshan busy himself and let the millet grains continue to stay with Pei Qian, but Qin Pingon walked to the house alone. Yuan Lingdian said that his junior brother Zhang Shanfeng was breathing and had to give up. Because he was just planning to take a short break, Qin Pingon did not go to Xiadongshan Taoist Temple. After all, there are still many visitors on the mountain, all of whom are climbing for the first time, like the old man Liang Shuang, Yu Guizong and his party, and of course Pu Shanzhang. La Tan Rong. The temporary rest place seemed to have been prepared by Cui Dongshan specially for his junior brother Zhou Xian. The house was not big, so after entering the courtyard, Qin Pingon chose a wing room. Qin Pingon just sat down cross-legged and was about to close his eyes for a moment. I found a little girl running up on the road outside the door. After approaching the house, she began to tiptoe and stood quietly, and then acted as the door at the door, holding a green bamboo stick and a golden pole in her arms. Qin Pingon smiled and stood up and walked out the door. In a house not far from Mi Xiefeng, Lu Jinglong looked at the apprentice with droopy eyebrows and smiled and asked, "What's the matter?" Logically speaking, when Qin Pingan returned to Xindu Mountain, Bai Shou should take a reassurance, and no longer have to worry about being beaten by Pei Qian for no reason. Bai Shou's face was full of entanglement, and his head fell dejected and said, "Blame that Bai Xian for giving me a huge problem." Lu Jinglong didn't ask why. The white head asked, "Lu, do you think it is important for face or loyalty to walk alone?" Lu Jinglong smiled and said, "Don't ask me, you figure it out." Bai Shou scratched his head with both hands, annoyed. They are all named Bai, so why bother with the surname Bai? Turned out to be that Bai Xian. There is a booklet that records many names. It is called a hero spectrum and it is full of hardcore heroes. Earlier, Bai Xian asked Bai Shou if we brothers should join in the grand event so that we can ask someone for justice in the future. If he helped Bai Xian conceal this, Bai Shou always felt that paper couldn't contain the fire and sooner or later he would be cut off. The heroes whose names are written on the booklet don't even want to run. But if you want to tell Pei Qian to inform, Bai Shou can't get through that hurdle in his heart. It seems that he is too unethical, not Bai Shou's usual style. Don't tell the news. I'm really afraid that Bai Xian, who is stunned, has already secretly recorded his name in the book and then things will be revealed. A yellow mud in his crotch, not our shit. This makes the white head hesitate, and in the end I thought it was safe to say that I told the surname Lu about this matter. Even if I was settled by Pei Qian later, I had a witness. Lu Jinglong heard the secret incident and said with a smile, "It's not a problem. To solve the bell you must tie the bell." "What do you mean?" The white head was confused and annoyed. "It's never meant to ask me to say something to Pei Qian in a huff, don't think about it. A big man, it doesn't matter how many times he has been beaten. Even though it's a glorious defeat, I have to take the initiative to subdue it. Let her eat the fart." Bai Shou hurriedly shut up. Lu Jinglong said helplessly, "I mean to ask you to find Qin Pinyin, and you want to see me as a witness. It is better to find Pei Qian's master to help." The white head palms with a boxing, "Wonderful." Outside the door there are two people, one big and one small. Qin Pingon in the green shirt, the little girl in black. Qin Pingon knocked on the door of the house, smiled and took the millet grains across the threshold. This guy went over the wall and entered the yard without knocking. Bai Shou couldn't care about this trivial matter. Anyway, the entire Mishua Peak was the site of his own brother. After Bai Shou got up, he laughed and said, "Qin Pinyin, you have heard about it, and Bai Xian was beaten up in the future. On my side, you have to help explain clearly to Pei Qian." Qin Pingon crossed the threshold and nodded with a smile. "Of course, there is no problem." At this moment, patronizing his cheerful white head, obviously has not realized the seriousness of the problem. Millet grains, two things have been silently noted. One big event was the heroic book about Bai Xian. There is another little thing, that is, the Peak Master of Pianran Peak, the Golden Pill Sword Fairy and White Head, directly address our good mountain masters by his name. The big event in the front involved the grievances of the rivers and lakes. But if someone accidentally misses the little thing behind it, it's probably not a big problem, right? Lu Jinglong glanced at the millet grains and then shifted his vision and found that Qin Pingon was suffocating it. Lu Jinglong coughed. Bai Shou was not stupid. He was shocked and immediately squeezed out a bright smile, saying, "Xiaomi Li, remember to help me with today's affairs, mainly to help Bai Xian keep it secret." Xiaomi Li immediately said with a serious face, "I absolutely don't know any booklet, I have never heard of it." Bai Shou felt that everything was in order and waved his big hand, "Brother, sit down and talk, drink and drink." Qin Pingon was about to take out a pot of wine from his sleeve. Lu Jinglong smiled and said, "In Dali capital I have already met Han Zhoujin. Thanks to someone, I am not small, and when I saw me, girl Han was very polite." Without further ado, he took out 2 pots of Changchun stuff which had been prepared long ago. Of course it is 2 pots per person. For fear that sect master Lu might not be able to drink, Han Zhoujin said that there are still a few pots left. Qin Pingon shook his sleeves and got up from the chair and said, "I'm going to see Zhang Shanfeng, so I won't chat with you for now." Lu Jinglong said with a puzzled face, "I just came here, now I'm leaving, don't you want to drink?" I saw that Qin Shanju was full of righteousness and said, "Which one of us is with whom? It is not bad for this meal. When the celebration is over we will talk about it later. Anything that is not polite, don't say, will be acceptable." Walking out of this house, Xiaomi Li lowered his voice and asked softly, "Good man Mountain Lord, sect master Lu has been persuaded to drink again?" Qin Pingon nodded and said, Yeah, what a good thing. Lu Dajiangxian has a good drinking capacity, he is famous and I can't envy him." After that, Qin Pingon knocked on the door of a house, and the one who opened the door was the old real man Liang Shuang, surnamed Xianxia outside Long Hushan. As for Ma Xianhui, who lives in the side room, he is a cultivator and often sleeps lightly before he truly attains the Tao. This young female champion quickly walked out of her wing and looked at the 3 people chatting around the table in the main room. "Earlier I heard Master mention the real reason for the great vision of Tong Yezhou, and I knew it at this young age." Ma Xianhui became more and more in awe of the next man in the blue shirt. Master sighed at that time. In the future the younger generation of monks will treat him as a land god. Just looking at the man in the green shirt, and then at the little black girl sitting on the same bench with him who was sipping wine, especially when he raised his head, smiled with her and called the girl Ma Xianhui nodded in greeting, smiled shyly and hurried back to the house. For no reason Ma Xianhui felt that he was a little afraid of him. After that, Qin Pingon took the millet grains to the place where Pushun Yunkatang was settled on Mishua Peak, the house of Lao Zhonglu. Seeing Qin Pingon, Tan Rong smiled bitterly and clasped his fists. Qin Pingon clasped his fists in return and apologized. "Before in Yun Chaotang, the juniors did not intentionally conceal their identity. Tan Rong said, "Can you ask Mr. Chen for how many seals?" The old monk wanted to say a seal, but he quickly changed his words. Qin Pingon nodded and agreed and asked if Tanzanglu had any seals he liked. Tan Rong only said that it all depends on Mr. Chen's freedom. On the side of Mishue Peak, a relatively rare mansion with deep courtyards and a veranda turning point was specially used to receive monks from the great sect genealogy. It had been idle all the time, but when the monk Yu Guizong came together to observe the ceremony, it happened to come in handy. On a night visit, Qin Pingon saw the ancestor hall of Yu Guizong, the king of Yupu realm enshrined. There is also the peak master of Jiu Feng, a genius sword repairer who can only be regarded as a child, Qiuji. And the direct disciples of Yu Guizong's contemporary Lord Wei Ying, two young Jindan realm sword repairmen, senior brother Wei Gusu and junior sister Wei Xianyu. There is also an old man named Zhang Fenggu with the road name Old Elephant, sitting on the main seat. In addition, the young master Jiang Hing and the group of Yunku Fudi, and the great sword fairy Su Hao who belongs to the outsider of Yu Guizong did not show up. Regarding this old ancestor of Yu Guizong who is of the same generation as the old Lord Sun Yuan, he is an immortal. The reason why Zhang Fengguzi did not show up in the previous battle where Yu Guizong was besieged by the monster clan, the old monk had his own difficulties. Because of this person's roots and feet, Qing Tong took the initiative to reveal the secret. According to legend, the largest dynasty in Tonggishao in the past years built an elephant house. Over time each has spirituality. It is possible to kneel and bow for 3 times with the monarch fairy teacher and the group of elephants. There is only one old elephant which is still ancient. Therefore the dynasty once asked Dan Qing to paint a memorial to the group elephants, most of which were huge and charming, but this old elephant was completely different. Qin Pingon only saw this child named Qiuji at the first glance and he felt a little close to him. At first glance there is an eye. And Qiuji, after seeing this famous hidden officer with his own eyes, it is almost the same, very different from the imagined image of hidden officer, sword immortal and sect master. Even if you don't feel domineering, you won't be sharp. Even if a Taoist person is introverted, talkative, willing to be pleasant and approachable, it's hard to be like the young elders on the mountain in the end, making Qiuji feel the other person seems to be on an equal footing with others all the time. When Qin Pingon was chatting with Zhang Fenggu and Wang Ji, he couldn't help looking at Qiuji. Such a little old child is already a Dragon Gate realm sword repairman. And it seemed that Qiuji had already felt the bottleneck of the Dragon Gate realm, and it would soon be the golden core. Qin Pingon almost blurted out, and in the future he would go to Yuguizong Jiaifeng to attend the ceremony. Only thinking of the purpose of the other party's trip, Qin Pingon had to forcibly hold back these words, and only said a seemingly very polite remark. Yu Guizong has a successor. I left and found Yao Xinji with the millet grains. Qin Pingon asked softly, the old general is asleep? Yao Xinji nodded and said helplessly, I finally fell asleep because my grandfather felt that he was blaspheming and finally he got a brow. He originally planned to watch the night until dawn, but after all, Grandpa is too old to be a sleepy bug. Qin Pingon laughed softly. When the old general wakes up in the morning, tell him that Tong Yes his blasphemy is covered by me and Xindu Mountain. Yao Xinji was surprised. Really? Qin Pingon smiled and said, is this something to be joking about? On the other side of the wing room opposite to Yao Xianzi's house, the lights turned yellow faintly through the window paper. It is Li Shiling, an old book from the Ministry of Etiquette, who is still reading at night. The old man also has another identity. He is the uncle of the current His Majesty the Emperor Daquan. Lao Shangshu once personally accompanied Cui Dongshan on a trip to the northern Jin dynasty, and it was under this person's matchmaking bridge that he bought an old mountain, which is now the Ximiao Mountain. The new emperor of the northern Jin kingdom was very courageous. He only offered 50 grain rain coins, and suggested that Master Cui would only need 200 grain rain coins if he was willing to take all of the old Wuyue Mountain. This is not sold but is equivalent to giving away for nothing. It's just certain transactions under the sun, and in many cases, it's really not just a matter of money. For example, if it is just a mountain where Jindan Dixian sits, even if the price doubles or even quadruples, the price of 800 grain rain money with the northern Jin dynasty will be offered, and the 5 old mountains must be packaged and bought. It is estimated that from the emperor himself to the ruling and opposition parties, They will only feel that they are humiliating and even provoking the northern Jin kingdom. Lao Xiangshu, who is looking to read books and keeps the years old, has a deep family history, rich collection and fine appreciation. He is the first-rate son of the Daquan dynasty, and he is also recognized as a young prodigy and romantic talent. Until he met Yao Xianzi's aunt, he completely received his heart. At the beginning, in order to marry her, because the Yao family of the frontier army adhered to a family ancestral motto, he did not want or dared to marry the high gate of the capital, and was worried that he would be jealous of the Emperor Li of Daquan. People finally get married. However, Li Xiling, who is a book of rights because his father was a former book of officials, and now in Daquan court, many things are not blindly close to the emperor, protégés faintly partisans, plus the elders of the former dynasty, most of whom rely on Li Xiling. Under the gate, there are also a group of young and strong-aged Qinglu civilian officials, as well as several military commanders from the frontier army. From the temple to the place, roughly 3 forces have formed, intertwined. Since the Daquan dynasty was a rare woman to proclaim the emperor, the former cousin of the Yao family became a noble member of the royal family, now headed by Yao Xianji, who served as the capital of the capital. Qin Pingon let the millet grains stay on Yao Xianzi's side. He went to knock on the door of the opposite room, and when he saw the old man walking out in his cloak, he said, "Qin Pingon, a lineage of Wenxing, has seen Li Xiangshu." Because Li Xiling went to Dafu Academy to study when he was young, and he studied with an academy gentleman, so he was not just a Confucian student in a broad sense, but also a student of the academy. As a scholar who reads sages and sages every day, Li Xiling can't show his cowardice no matter who he sees. The old Xiangshu, who was still a little bit sullen, suddenly smiled and hurriedly returned the courtesy, but when he got up, the old man had already smiled slightly and said, "I can't afford it, I can't afford to be a gift from Mr. Chen." There is no shortage of topics with Li Xiling. After all, Qin Pingon is familiar with the Daquan dynasty, so after being dragged by Lao Xiangshu and chatting for a full hour, Qin Pingon was able to get away. After that, Qin Pingon took the millet grains to Pei Qian's side, and found that Chao Sunny was sitting beside the brazier, and there was also a Mi de Jianxian who seemed to be waiting for the rabbit here. The millet grains began to take out the seeds from the messenger cotton bag, and divided the seeds into the seeds. Except for those staying in Luopa Mountain and Qilong Lane, Zheng Dafeng is in the colorful world. Chief Zhou and Wei Xian all went to the barren world. Lu Baixiong, among the 4 in the painting scroll of Uefuti, came to 2 direct disciples with Yuan Baoan and had his own school. The 9 sword fairy embryos brought back by Qin Pingon from the Great Wall of Jianqi, including Yu Qingzhong and He Xiangting, have been enshrined in Yu on the Luopa Mountain, following the old Jianxiu to travel to other continents. Qin Lingjun and Guizhujiu, Qin Pingan's current young disciple, are still on the side of Lushan in Ao Pingzhou, watching the opening ceremony of the Huangliang sect. Unknowingly, time passed and the cotton satchel of millet grains was thick. At dawn, the sky was bright outside the house. There is a waning moon outside the sky with several stars. The smoke of Spring Mountain is about to collect, and the sound of chickens shouting to retreat to Maodian Moon in the world outside the mountain. Qin Pingon stood up and smiled. "I'll go to rest for a while." About half an hour before the next festival, the genealogical members of Luopa Mountain and Xindu Mountain, together with the guests, began to arrive at the square outside Qingping Peak's Patriarch Hall one after another. In fact, the first group of people who were there were the millet grains. They were 1 hour away and they had already arrived here. In addition to millet grains, there were also Bai Xian, Chai Wu and Sun Chun kings. They were a small mountain head. Of course, there is Jia Xing, who is busy with people and things early. Planting autumn will come to the square later than the old fairy Jia. When the cultivator who was about to be the next accountant and the god of wealth arrived, Jia Xing naturally stood behind the cultivator and there was not much to talk. More and more visitors to Xindu Mountain showed up in the square outside Qingping Fengzhu Shitang. However, some of these guests will soon change their identities. At the moment, there are 3 people in the Daquan dynasty: the old General Yao Zhen, and the Daquan Mirage Jingqing Mansion in Yaxi. Li Xiling, the Book of Etiquette. Taiping Mountain Female Crown Huang Ting, Yupu Realm Sword Repair. Next to Huang Ting, stood a guardian who returned to her hometown from Wuxia Xianxia. The newly acquired mountain was enshrined in Negative Mountain, with the road name Negative Mountain. A pair of mentors and apprentices came from the Taishu Mountain in the Middle Earth. As expected, the Immortal, named Dragon Gate, brought his disciples to talk about Yingzhou. Next to the master and apprentice, there is also a direct disciple of Qin Pingon brother Zhou Xian Jing Yugon. Pu Shan Yun Chaotang the mountain master Yi Yun Yun, the big disciple Shui Huai Pu Shan Zhang Lv Tan Rong. Zhong Tu Shenzhou surnamed Tianshi outside Long Hushan Liang Shuang. The old true man was on Tongyi's his side and accepted a disciple Ma Xianhui the crowned lady. Beiju Luzhou is lying on the top of the mountain, a pair of brothers Yuan Lingdian and Zhang Shanfeng. Yuguizong Jiuifeng the new peak master sword repairman in the Dragon Gate realm Yang Qiuji. Jiang's cloud cave blessed land, Jiang Shengzhen's eldest son Jiang Heng. Sovereign Wei Ying's two concubines Jian Xiu, Nian Jiu and Sui Yu. The real names are Wei Gusu and Wei Xianyu. The ancestor hall of Shenzhenfeng enshrines Wang Ji and Yupu realm. Ai Aizhou Liu's guest Qin driven mountain crossing the sword fairy Su Hao an outsider. Jiang Heng is about to meet Qin Pingon for the second time. Last time I was on Hohot Island, one of the intercontinental ferry boats in Old Longqing, and went to Upside Down Mountain. At that time the identity and realm of the two sides were quite different. The old Dadu Longgong teacher mother was born and the old Chudu is Chudu. The only direct disciple of the old woman, the engagement shop on the banks of the Jilin River, the girl who Chuling nicknamed Vinegar and Vinegar. Zhong Kue took the fat man Eugene with the identity of a ghost and called himself Gusu. Wei Xianyu secretly looked at the sword Immortal Mi Daijian who was in white clothes Xianxia. Looks really good. Su Hao took the initiative to find Pei Qian. This unsmiling sword fairy Su Jun saw Pei Qian, his face showed a rare smile. Pei Qian clasped his fists in a salute. In that Jinjiazi battlefield, one sword fairy and one swordman, the two sides have fought side by side several times. In fact, Su Hao was willing to Yuguizong this time, just thinking of being able to chat with Pei Qian. This young great sword immortal from Jin Jiazhou looking at Pei Qian's eyes, is similar to a younger generation who looks at his own family with great promise. Su Hao also asked Pei Qian when he would travel to Jinjiazu again and greet him when he was there, saying that he was there and he was still on the mountain. Zhong Kue had a very happy chat with the old general Yao Zhen. Fatty Eugene's eyes were not idle, and when he saw the young female champion Ma Xianhui, he was deeply moved. Sui took her disciple Qing Chaolu to the right. She stood with Huang Ting and asked about some of the terroirs of the colorful world. Yu Jisham was chatting with the old woman Chudu. Yu Guizong and his party stood together with Lu Jinglong, the lord of Taihui Jianzong, and the white head of Pianranfing Peak. Bai Shou deliberately or unintentionally avoided that Bai Xian. Yuan Lingdian and the fairyland with the road named Dragon Gate really got together, because Master Huolong is an old acquaintance with Guaoding. In the square, after learning that the little spirit named Xing Yugon turned out to be Lu Xv's high apprentice, many people couldn't help but look more. Since he is Lu Shila's disciple, he is Qin Pingan's nephew according to his cultural heritage. When Xing's lineage, how the atmosphere is, several worlds are clear. Xiao Mo stood with a group of Xiandu Mountain's newest genealogical monks. In fact, the latter didn't even know how sacred this fellow with yellow hat, blue shoes and green bamboo sticks was. In this way, Qing Tong seemed a little alone. Then in the square there was a sudden silence, but soon they continued to talk about each other, obviously just feeling a little surprised and didn't take it too seriously. Because just now 3 people appeared inexplicably, Ai Aizhou Lu Kaishan, with his only son Lu Yuzhou beside him. In addition, there is the supreme emperor of the Xian secret dynasty Yu Panshui. Both sides showed up here in a way recognized as the most upstart on the mountain. Lu Jubao took the initiative to hold a fist and salute the old real man Liang Shuang, while Lu Yuzhou swam around and saw her immediately. Yu Panshui walked to Cui Dongshan and Chao Qingqing, who stood side by side. There is still a piece of incense sticking kung fu before the celebration. From the mountain road connecting Mishue Peak and Qingping Peak, there is a sword repairer, Tao Ran, who is going to step on a spot to participate in the opening of the mountain celebration. Hearing the footsteps behind him, he turned his head and looked at the man in the blue shirt who had a fate on the banks of the Rin River. But today he did not wear 2 swords, instead he replaced him with a back sword. There are so many tricks. The man followed Tao Ran's footsteps and greeted with a smile. Tao Jianxian. Tao Ran nodded with a dark face. Qin Pingon said, "Don't worry, today's celebration will not be held for too long and everything will be kept simple." Tao Ran said, Whatever, I can sit on the chair and doze off after I hang the statue on the wall with incense. Qin Pingon nodded and smiled. Of course it's okay. Tao Ran said directly. As Mr. C's elders, the opening ceremony is not a trivial matter on the mountain. You're not in a hurry. It's a bit outrageous, right? Qin Pingon smiled and said, anyway, I'm already busy, so why should I take a break from my busy schedule now? Tao Ran asked casually, have you turned on Jinghua Shuiyue? Qin Pingon shook his head and said, no, I can't do the fancy thing about swollen face and fat man. Tao Ran smiled and said, yes. It's not easy to be able to put the matter of having no money in your pocket so grandly. Tao Ran said in a bad mood, don't take a bite of Tao Xianxians in the future, I don't like to listen. If you leave it before, just my temper is equivalent to asking me about the sword. Qin Pingon smiled and nodded, okay. After bypassing a small road, the vision of both parties suddenly opened up, and as they climbed up the steps, it was the Bayou Square outside the Qingping Peak Patriarch Hall. This time it was truly silent. Tao Ran nodded secretly, don't look at the small mountain top, never thought that the rules of the house are quite heavy. As for the guests, how many celestial immortals can come from Tongyi's Hao today? Then we Tao Jianxian saw that. Pushan Huangyun. Tao Ran used to cultivate wildly in the mountains, unwilling to deal with the mountains. No one can recognize anyone. He would never recognize Yi Yunyun, who is both a great beauty and a boundless martial artist. Wait a minute, how does that man look at Lu Kaishan who looks so much like Ai Aizhou? And why is the style of Yugizong Jianxiu looking at the style of dressing in saber? Just to deceive a golden core sword with a broken life sword, Yushindu Mountain wouldn't have such a big battle, right? Next to Tao Ran, I saw everyone on the square heading to his side together. Everyone looked solemn and saluted. On the peak of Qingping, the swordsman in Qingshan, smiling and holding his fists in return. End of this chapter. Sword of Coming Chapter 958. Tao Ran swallowed, bit his scalp, boldly asked in his heart, who are you really? Tao Jianxian didn't even dare to call his name directly, it was too shameful. Qin Pingon smiled and replied in his heart, last time I was on the banks of the river I had already said it. If nothing else it would be me. Tao Jianxian didn't believe it. You let Lao Tzu believe it. I saw a young man casually on the way with a pair of knives hanging around his waist, and a blue shirt, long coat and cloth shoes, and then claiming to be Qin Pingon. I was stupid to believe it. It's like a man on the horizon suddenly walking to the front and walking out of the book like a man in a book. Today Cui Dongshan, who is wearing a white dress with a sword, stretched out his thumb towards Tao Ran in the distance, while Mi Daijiangxian on the side winked at Tao Jianxian. Before the auspicious hour of the opening ceremony, Qin Pingon hurried forward and exchanged greetings with the guests. Taking advantage of this opportunity, his brain was filled with sword repairs and he looked left. Looking at the right, he chose a place for himself to stay. Finally, Qin Pingon took the hand of his nephew Jing Yugon and stopped at a small mountain head, at the extreme edge. These will soon become the genealogy of the Qingping Peak of Xindu Mountain. Monk, it's funny to say that most of them still don't know the true identity of the sword fairy in front of them. After they came to the square before, they gathered together subconsciously, but there was nothing to chat with each other. When the square was crowded after that, it was obviously more cramped and restrained. At this moment Qin Pingon clasped his fists and smiled and said, I formally introduce myself. My surname is Qin and my name is Pingon. I am a native of Longquan County in Longquan County of Aquarius. Soon the Wenxing who restored the Confucian Temple. I am also the husband of Cui Dongshan, Pei Qian and Chao Qingqing. This is also the first time Qin Pingon has revealed the identity of the Shangzong Mountain Lord and has a serious dialogue with them. Qin Pingon touched the heads of the children next to him and introduced with a smile, Jing Yugon is Brother Zhengqian's disciple and my nephew. At this moment the group of people standing opposite Qin Pingon except for Tao Ran who was born in Tongyi's Hao Shanzai's Jindanjian repairer. There are also two immortals and ghosts who are a pair of Taoists, who are proficient in formations Wu Go and Xiaomenying. 3 exiled monks from the old Yezigang Shi Tower Lan Yi Yu Xinglo and Fu Zhu. His true identity is Xiao Poxian, the fallen prince of the old Zhuang dynasty in Beipingzu. And the maid Meng Long who followed him to the north and south and had a long escape career. She has now changed her name to Dugu Misty, and Tong Yezhou is about to usher in the second female monarch. For this pair of masters and servants, Cui Dongshan had previously asked Xiao Mo to help with blindfolding. Next to the two, there was also a female cultivator, Shiqiu, who came from Luzhou Dajiao Mountain in Beiju. Qin Pingan looked at Shiqiu. Shiqiu pursed his lips and smiled, nodding lightly. Qin Pingan once again clasped his fists to thank. Xiandushan founded the Zhongmen from site selection to construction, to today's celebration. In fact, every link is extremely hasty, and within a short time, Xiandushan Zhufeng has this scale, which is equivalent to setting up a ferry on the ground and starting from nothing. Everyone has worked hard. Leaving aside the 3 old Laopashen men from Xiaopoxian, Jian Xiutao Ran who took over the shop on the Rin River, as well as the 2 groups of monks Wu Go and Yujigang Lan Yi, were all brought to Xindu Mountain by Cui Dongshan himself. Yes, so it can be regarded as the veteran of the establishment of the mountain following Cui Dongshan. The 2 parties used to contribute mainly to the construction of the wind kite ferry and the construction of the ferry. The wind kite of one of the intercontinental ferry boats, no matter the number of members or the combat power, itself is equivalent to a small school on the mountain. On the ferry, Cui Dongshan carefully refined the talisman puppets and golden armored warriors. There are nearly 100 of them. They are named Yugong, Jinshi, Taishanging, Moyuer, etc. Whether they are skins or mines, they are all related to each other. Real people are no different. Responsible for the daily maintenance of the Fengyuan ferry and the geographical survey on the ferry route. The main responsibility of the latter is actually to hunt for treasures in the mountains and rivers of Tonghishao. Therefore, they were sealed by Cui Dongshan as a temporary official position. Landscape inspection, and Wu Go and Xiao Menying, who are proficient in formation, are responsible for the daily operation of Fengyuan ferry. Qin Pingan and Xiao Poxian said in their hearts, I have seen Shanjun Jinqing. You set up a country on the banks of the river. Let's talk about it later. Xiao Poxian smiled and nodded in thanks. Qin Pingan smiled and asked, when will you be among the 5 realms? Xiao Poxian looked sad, difficult. In addition to these weird landscape inspections, there are more than 200 talismans and organ puppets whose ranks are far lower than those of Yugong and Yuer. There are as many as 200 coolies. Dushan Mansion and Ferry are all contributing their efforts, and the 3 monks from Yezigang Shialu were temporarily ferry supervisors. They are all young and over 100 years old, and they are not high in their realm now. 2 views of the sea in 1 cave. In fact, before Qin Pingan arrived, the 3 of them were completely frightened. Because of the small chats of the many guests around, no one deliberately used their heartfelt words. For example, the young woman with a ball and hair bun is no stranger. He often meets at the ferry and knows her name is Pei Qian, but how can she be with that? The famous female master, Zhou Xian, hooked up? After Pei Qian talked about the Jinjiazhou war with the man she respected as Su Jianxian through Pei Qian, and mentioned Chao Ci Yi Yufu and others, Pei Qian also took the initiative to mention that he had met an old man in purple. Immortal Fu Lu Yuxian. In this way, the man's identity was revealed, and it was the Jinjiazhou Great Sword Immortal, Su Hao, who was known as the Sword Immortal Su Jun. The guest of the Lu family from Ia's Hao. After crossing the continent to Tonghishao, he settled on the side of Kishandu. According to the tidbits reported by several Shanshuidi, I heard that it was to prevent Yu Guizhong from making several ferry boats to Liu's family. Xiaozhi Yu Guizhong specially sent the Zushitang to worship Wang Ji, to confront the sword fairy Su Jun in the drive of Shandu. It just so happened that Wang Ji was here today, and he also took the child who was less than 10 years old, who turned out to be the new peak owner of Yuguizhong Juifeng. Pushun Huang Yiyun. She was selected as one of the top 10 martial arts masters in Tonghish's history, and Wu Tan the martial sage, are the only 2 end-of-life martial arts in Tonghishao. And that old man turned out to be the first of the top 10 dynasties of Tonghishao, the grandfather of Yao Jinji, the current female emperor of the Daquan dynasty, and the old general Yao Zhen. There are 2 people beside the old man. One is the Shangshu of the Ministry of Rites, and the young man with a lame leg and broken arm is Lord Fu Yin from Daquan Mirage City. In addition, as well as claiming to be a monk from Taishishan in the Middle-earth God Island, there are also 2 Taoist priests from Badi Peak in Luzhou, Beiju. Isn't that a rebiography of the real fire dragon, or even a direct disciple? They said with Master Cui Xian beforehand that they can guarantee that the 3 infamous people, while preserving the identity of Yezigang genealogy monk, will be able to eat in Xindu Mountain, at least not having to linger outside and get stunned. After all, the sect of Yezigang was destroyed and it was an open door. Finally, an old throne demon Qiun took the lead in climbing the mountain. The massacre was exhausted, especially the beautiful repairs. The end was terrible, but now almost all the local monks in Tonggishao, I feel that Yezigang is to blame. In fact, the 3 fellows of Lan Yi are satisfied enough with this. It is hard to say how grateful to the Master Cui, but it is definitely not an exaggeration to say that he is sincerely grateful to Xindu Shanyu. Even if Mr. Cui speaks directly, he has made clear his intentions early, that is, he has taken a fancy to their unique craftsmanship secreted by Shiyi building. What does it matter? There is a place to live, and you can share the accounts together to earn money, not to mention that Cui Xianxia will not ask them for the Shilu secret method for refining talisman beauty. Qin Pingon didn't use his heartfelt words and directly said to the 3 of them, "You only need to practice peacefully on Xindu Mountain. Someday you want to regain your old identity. Wait until you feel that the time is right in all aspects, even if you take the initiative to ask for it." Breaking away from the Xindu Mountain genealogy, I can replace Cui Dongshan to assure you that there will be no obstacles on Xindu Mountain, renew the incense inheritance of Yezigang Shi Tower, and even rebuild Yezigang Xindu Mountain will be slightly thinner. In addition, if you are willing on our side of Xindu Mountain, you will see people's hearts for a long time, and you can trust Sect Master Cui in Xindu Mountain. Then the 2 sides will formally become allies on the mountain. Before that, you can take the initiative to find scattered places. For the monks from Yezigang, Xindu Mountain will take out a mountain as a temporary dojo to specially house them. Lan Yi and the 3 people seem to have eaten a big reassurance pill, which was simply a big surprise. They alone don't even have a monk from the Earth Immortal. In their lifetime, rebuilding the Shi Tower is a great luxury, let alone renewing the incense for the entire Yezigang Patriarch Hall. Cui Dongshan smiled knowingly. The husband obviously said it deliberately to everyone present. The husband is going to make his own conclusion about the destruction of Yezigang. Probably from the husband's point of view, if the times are troubled and you are destined to not tolerate a dizzy Yezigang, then Tonggishao will inevitably need a Yezigang in the future of Taiping. Therefore, no matter how the whole Tonggishao views the incident at Yezigang from Ao Pingzhou Luopa Mountain to Tonggishao Qingping Jianzong, they are willing to renew the incense for Yezigang. Cui Dongshan is full of energy. It's great. The more you can manage, the better. I'm afraid that Mr. will completely be the shopkeeper of shaking hands. From now on, if you are not enthusiastic about Xindu Mountain and don't care about it, then you are a proud student. How worried you are. Cui Dongshan came to Tao Ran, bumped Tao Jianxian with his elbow and said with a heartfelt smile, "Tao Jianxian, tell you a few things. First of all, Jiangshang is really our Xindu Mountain Shangzong, the chief consecration of Luopa Mountain, but with I've got a pseudonym called Zhou Fei. Sovereign Jiang is in our Laopao Mountain. His temper is old and his reputation is very strong, so if you become a member of Xindu Mountain's Patriarch Hall, what if you scold him a few words?" Mouthful. Surprise is not a surprise? Tao Ran sullen his face and silently told himself that even Qin Pingyan is really Qin Pingyan, and it is a trivial matter not to scold Jiang Shang. Then it's the you me that's an unobtrusive look at you. It's me you, the me from the Great Wall of Sorchi. Is it unexpected? Tao Ran carefully glanced from the corner of his eyes. Miyu Tao Jianxian smiled awkwardly and rubbed his waist subconsciously, always feeling chilly. In fact, from Qin Pingyan to Xiaomo to Miyu, Tao Ran has already been scolded. As the senior sister of Xiaolu, Lan Yi cried with joy and choked up. Why should Mr. Qin treat us 3 unknown people so kindly? Qin Pingon gave his own answer. I don't talk about the merits and demerits of that tragic change, nor the established facts that made a big mistake. I only talk about one thing. If there is no compassion, why open the door? Qin Pingon said, the journey is bumpy and there is a long way to go. During this process, there will definitely be a lot of criticism. You should be mentally prepared early. Then Qin Pingon smiled and said, of course, if you give up this idea someday and feel it's too difficult, you'll do your best and you're still unable to do it. If you can't do it, you can't do it. Wiziandushan also welcomes you. At that time, King Pingfeng Patriarch Hall will arrange a chair for one of you. Lan Yi, Yu Xinglo, Fu Zhu, the trio and the 2 suzerains Qin Pingon and Cui Dongshan expressed their gratitude. The auspicious time has come. Chao Sunny took out the key and opened the gate of King Pingfeng Patriarch Hall. Qin Pingon and Cui Dongshan, Mr. and students walked side by side into the gate, crossed the threshold, and took the lead towards the main hall of the Patriarch Hall. As the ancestral mountain of Xindu Mountain in Qingpingfeng Patriarch Hall, only one scroll is hanging at the moment. The ancestor of Shangzong, Qin Pingon, the lord of Luopa Mountain. The green shirt carries the sword on his back and the hosta is not on his head. Extremely expressive. In the end, Cui Dongshan still didn't follow the instructions of Mr. and hung the 3 hanging statues of Ji Sifeng Zushitang in the center, and then hung the portraits of him and Cui Dongshan on the left and right ends respectively. Today the celebration of the establishment of the next sect in Xindu Mountain is still as usual. Like the previous Luopa Mountain, there is no red tape and it is extremely simple and not cumbersome. In the Patriarch Hall, there are 2 rows of chairs on the left and the other on the right. On the first sect, Luopa Mountain, Song Xindu Mountain Qingping Jianzong. On one side is Qin Pingon Changming and Wei Wenlong. Peiqian Zhou Li Xiaomo Jiaxing Zhang Jiazhen. Rear seats Nalan Yubi by Xian Sunchun Wang Chai Wu. 12 people in total. On the other side there is Cui Dongshan Wonderland. Mi Yu, a sword repairer in Wonderland. Cui Wei Yuaning Realm Sword Repair. Cultivation of Autumn, the pinnacle of Wufu in the remote travel world. On the right of the Sui Dynasty Yuaning Realm Sword Repair. Chao Sunny Brother Jindan. Tao Ran Golden Core Realm Sword Repair. In the back row there is Xiao Poxi and Yuan Yingjing Jianxiu. Menglong Shiqiu. Go to Jiang. Yuxian Hui Qing Chaolu Higu. Wu Go Xiao Menying 2 Immortals and Ghost. Lani Yuxinglo Fuzhu. A total of 19 people. There are 31 members in the upper and lower cases. Behind the 2 rows of chairs on the left and right, there are seats for the guests. One is a native of Tongyi's Hao behind Cui Dongshan, the other is a foreigner on Qin Pingan's side. Dequan Dynasty Yao Zhen Fu Yin Yao Xianji Li Xiling, the Book of Rites. Taiping Mountain is the master of Huang Ting, and the mountain is enshrined in Negative Mountain. Pushun Thatched Cottage, the mountain master Yi Yunyun Zhang Lv Tan Rong Shui Huai. Zhang Finggu, the ancestor of Yuguazong, enshrines Wang Ji Qiuji, the master of Ji Peak Wei Gusu Wei Xianyu and Jiangheng, the blessed land of Yunku. Qiudu Hu Chuling. Zhongkue Eugene. The town's demon building is the same. Long Hushan, the surnamed Great Celestial Master Liang Shuang Ma Xianhui. Litafeng refers to Xianfeng Yuanling Hall and Zhang Shenfeng. Taihui Jianzong, the Lord Lu Jinglong, the white head of Pian Ranfeng. Taishishan really talk about Ingzhou. Jing Yugan. Jin Jiazis Great Sword Fairy Su Hao. AI Zhou Lu Jubao Lu Yuzhou. Middle Earth Shenzhou Mysterious Dynasty Yu Panshui. 2 groups of guests, a total of 35 people. The seating arrangements on both sides are also very interesting because there is no arrangement at all and everyone just sits down. Last time at the Jai's Peak of Luopa Mountain, Qin Wanshu and Zhou Mili were responsible for handing incense. This time King Pingfeng was replaced by Chao Qingqing and Zhou Mili, each holding a pot of incense. And the last time Luopa Mountain established the sect celebration, the ancestors of the Patriarch Hall of Jisa Peak were honored with incense. 43 patriarchs of Patriarch Hall of Pei's Peak were in front, and 36 people who watched the ceremony were in the back. This time the next sect worshipping incense ceremony, except for Qin Pingon, who is the ancestor of Shangzong, does not need to respect the incense, wearing a green shirt, just standing in the position headed on the left. After all the people worshipped the incense in turn, they looked for chairs to sit down. Zhong Kue could obviously feel Qin Pingan's embarrassment. Too young and promising is not good. There was a person standing there alone, and then he was tasted by the great Tianshi outside Long Hushan, the of Wealth Lius and Yu Panshui. Fat Eugene feels helpless and always feels that he has suffered a great loss. Just thinking that Zhong Kue would have to negotiate with Qin Pingan to get back 50% of his family status for himself, so he endured it. Zhang Shanfeng was also holding back his laugh. Qing Tong finds it very interesting. After that, Cui Dongshan took Chao Qingqing and Luopashen right guardian Zhou Mili, according to the customary mountain rules, first went to unveil the 2 plaques of the mountain gate and the ancestor hall. Qingping Jianzong. At the foot of Qingping Peak, I had to erect the ladder honestly and hang up the pair of couplets presented by Wu Shuangjiang. Then he returned to the Patriarch Hall. If it weren't for Xindu Mountain's intention to keep everything simple, there will be a respected monk who will serve as a roll call official, and will be responsible for reading aloud some of the ancestors' heads of immortals, and dynasties who have not been there in person. A various congratulations. Generally, the next sect ceremony in the awe-inspiring world, because of the foundation of the previous sect and the passion of various incense, it may only be this part, Often it will take half an hour or even longer because congratulations are often as many as hundreds of copies. Skip this link. Cui Dongshan began to introduce all the people present step by step, starting from the Shangzong Luopa Mountain, then the Qingping Sword genealogy monk and finally the guest. The next step is the longevity of Luopa Shan's Hanglu, announcing the members of the Patriarch Hall of Qingping Sword sect. Qin Pingon. The first Lord Cui Dongshan, the master of the law Cui Wei, the chief worshipper Miyu, was in charge of a financial planting autumn. On the right of the Sui dynasty Chao Sunny, Tao Ran Wu Go and Xiao Menying. After that Cui Dongshan as the suzerain, officially invited Huang Ting of Taiping Mountain to serve as the chief guest for Qingping Jianzong. Pushun Yi Yunyun and Dequan Yao Xianji are famous guests. Inviting Qing Tong and Qiu Du to serve as the honorable mention of Qingping Sword sect, and Jian Xiu Chao Jun, who was unable to attend the meeting today, to serve as the last worship. The three are equivalent to serving as members of the Qingping Peak Patriarch Hall. At this point the guests' observance of the ceremony is over. After that, Qingping Jianzong's first meeting of the Patriarchs meeting will be held. Members include Qin Pingyun, Chong Ming, Wei Wenlong, Pei Qian, Zhou Li, Xiao Mo, Jiaxing. Cui Dongshan, Miyu, Cui Wei, Tongqiu Sui on the right, Chao Sunny. Tao Ran, Wu Go, Xiao Menying, Qiu Du. In addition, the five ancestors have seats for worship: Kaching, Qing Tong and Qiu Du. Huang Ting, Yi Yunyun, Yao Xianji. Qin Pingon personally sent the audience out of the Patriarch Hall. Except for a few who stayed in the square, they all began to return to the mansions and courtyards of Mi Xiefeng. Not in a hurry to return to the Patriarch Hall, Qin Pingon came to Lu Jubao and Yu Panshui, who were on the top of the mountain, and said with a smile, "I'm so negligent." Lu Jubao smiled and said jokingly, "You don't have to say hello to the hundreds of people you know and don't know. I'm an idler from start to finish. I would like to participate in such a relaxed and comfortable watching ceremony." Yu Panshui glanced at the fairy and said with a smile, "His Lord Hidden Officer, that wind kite fairy is not bad, right?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "One more one will be even better." Yu Panshui was impatient and complained, "Don't pick fat, just pick thin ones. There is no such business experience in the world." Cui Dongshan jumped up and hugged Yu Panshui's neck so that the latter had to bow his head and bow his waist. "Fatty you, who is fat if you are not fat?" Lu Jubao coughed slightly and someone was finally willing to take his gaze back from somewhere, and hurriedly smiled and greeted the hermit. Qin Pingon looked at Lu Yuzhou, nodded and smiled. "I miss Osmanthus Island for so many years, I miss it very much." Both sides were still teenagers. The Qingping peak of Xindu Mountain towers into the clouds. Standing on the top of the mountain and looking into the distance, the sea of clouds is surging in the field of vision. On the white cloud in a blue shirt, Wan Jing is in both eyes. In the Xuandu temple, a fat man who seems to be able to breed fat every season, hanging from his waist is a peach charm that was personally given by the master of the old temple, and he can ignore those that are enough to make an ascendant monk hit the wall. Mysteriously restrained, Yanzhua Pidian found Sun Daocheng's dojo, which was a famous Vipassana, lightly knocked on the jumen of the main hall and asked tentatively, "Old Guanzhu, are you in retreat? Are you busy?" An impatient voice came from the room, "If you have something to say, it's okay to get out of it." Yanzhua rubbed his hands outside the door and said, "When I came here I knew someone from outside the world. He didn't wear robes or scarves. Instead he had hairpins and flowers. If the other person's character is in the palm of the hand, to be strong, maybe it is a huge business that never ceases to flow with a huge profit." Yanzhua had just left the door. He called it a go out to practice, but it was actually a group of side branches and hilltops of the vassal of the Xuandu temple. Before, in the ancestral courtyard of Zuanduguan, Yanzhua didn't feel anything. Anyway, he could see the master of the old man in the peach forest every 3 to 5. He moved 2 benches to sit in the stream and drank a little wine together. As for the difference of 7 or 8 generations between the two sides, Dao Changsun does not pay attention to it, and Yanzhua is not polite. Dao Changsun does not take things seriously and acts and works. Those Haigong real people are even more polite to Yanzhua. In addition, Xian Du Guan is a Taoist sword fairy. In the veins, the Taoist officials often carry swords or sabers, which naturally gave Yanzhua an illusion. It seems that he is still in his hometown in the Great Wall of Jianqi. You don't need to care about your seniority, realm or anything. As a result, when Yanzhua really left Xuandu Temple and went to the vast mountains and rivers outside, He learned that the Taoist priests from the ancestral court of Xuandu Temple were out of the house. They were very famous and those grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the world. The Lord, the true guardian of the country, spread branches and leaves all over Qizhou, and saw this young fat man. He didn't need Yanzhua to give out the prepared rhetoric. He was very polite to this young fat man from the ancestral court. Polite. In fact, Yanzhua misunderstood. Not all genealogical officials who came out of Xiandu Temple had this treatment. Those Dao sect immortals were actually really curious about what this fat man had to do with the old Guanzhou, so they all used it. With a playful look of, the old master shouldn't have found an illegitimate child to take home outside. He looked at the more face-to-face surnamed Yan Jianxiu. After all, there are not many Taoist priests who dare to fight the Taolin idea. The old master has always adhered to a certain purpose. Since he has accepted disciples, the teacher does not teach it by himself. Should they be allowed to run outside and let outsiders teach the principles of life? Coupled with some unique and distinctive styles of the old view master, by the way, the entire Xuandu view is unique in the Qingming world, and it is possible to walk sideways outside the Baiyujing realm. As for Yanzhua's true identity as the Xuantuguan of the ancestors of the various veins, he has not publicized it to the outside world, deliberately concealing it. If the old master doesn't mention this, who dares to leak the news? Therefore, even in today's Xuandu Temple, there are no more than 10 Taoists who know that Yanzhua is from the Great Wall of Jianqi, together with the Taoist gatekeeper Han Zhanran with the Taoist name, Chunwei. Anyway, Xiandu Guan never lacks stories and talks. Sun Daochong sneered and said, "Is that the madman who likes to pretend to be auntie? I heard that this servant swayed all the way to the border of Qizhou before stopping. It was really a dog nose." This is not the case when the senior sister left the customs and immediately rushed over. However, the other party still understood some rules, and did not directly enter the realm of Xuandu view. After all, Xuandu Guan couldn't deal with the mountain where he was. This guy was probably worried about being covered in sack. As for the so-called business that Fatty Yen said, it was not to harm that peach forest. At first, Yanzhua deceived a big fool's smile into solidification. After a moment of silence, Yanzhua jumped and furiously said, "Could it be a liar? It's really a rebellion. I dare to swindle and abduct to the door of our Xuandu temple. I will call Sister Zhan Ran and ask him for justice." It turned out that the other party threatened that the peach stick pen, peach talisman, peach leaf bookmark and other items that Yanzhua carefully manufactured could be sold to Yongzhou, which is not bordered by Qizhou, so that he could make a lot of money. As long as Yan Xinguan nodded, he could wait to collect the money in the future. In addition, Xuanduguan still has a basket of peaches every year. Anyway, every year the Taoists of Xuanduguan can't finish it. They don't charge money as gifts, so why waste it? There are so many Taoist halls. There are celebrations every day. When there are celebrations, you need a dustpan and a basket of Xianxia vegetables and fruits. The Xuanduguan Xiantao, which is famous throughout the Qingming world, can worry about its sales? Yanzhua felt that it was feasible. No matter how courage the other party was, no matter how high his backing was, he wouldn't dare to fool us into Xuantuguan's head, right? How did he register himself with you? This guy calls himself Qingling. He has a name but no surname. He doesn't have a Dao name or anything. He says that he has only been in trouble for a long time. There are many friends on the road and they are willing to sell him a bit of thin noodles. Hearing this, the veteran inside the house sneered. This is a gangster and there are many friends on the road. I asked him what his realm was and he honestly explained that he is a fairyland from the top mountain in Yongzhou, very prestigious in his sect, and I see him with 3 entourages around him. It seems that they are all Land the God. Probably because I'm afraid I won't believe it. This fellow Qingzero Daoist also actively asked to take an iron flute with him as a deposit, but I didn't dare to receive it. He reported a mailing address and it is estimated that at this time still waiting for my news. Sun Daochong smiled and hesitated whether to inform the senior sister of this person's news. This place is actually the Patriarch Hall of Xuandu Temple, the root place of all the branches and leaves of the Sword Immortal family of Taoism in the world. There are as many as 40 or 50 portraits of Taoist ancestors hanging in the main hall. The Taoist temples of the Xianxia sect and the descendants of the temple outside by Yujing, hanging statues depend on their respective backgrounds. In addition, some are Jindan Taoist. After death, the hanging statues can occupy a place in the Patriarch Hall and enjoy the incense. But for a behemoth like Xianduguan, it needs to be a Yupu realm monk to start. It is only because he is a contemporary master who has a high level of Taoism and long enough to live long enough to occupy the pit without for too many years. Therefore, many of the patriarchs above the statues are actually lower in seniority than Sun Huaizhong. The hanging statues in the Patriarch's Hall are arranged in order from high to low according to their seniority, and they are like a pagoda in the end. On the upper part of the wall there are 3 hanging statues which are blank and 2 are juxtaposed. They belong to the future Master Sun Huaizhong and the senior sister Wang Sunday. It's like a kind of vacant position to wait. In the Qingming world it is not too strange. This is the reason that the old people don't hesitate to talk about life and death, and they will prepare the coffin for themselves early in life. The more blank hanging statues in the hall of the patriarchs of the immortal mansion on a mountain naturally means the more living patriarchs of this sect. The gate of the patriarch hall slowly opened. Sun Daochong crossed the threshold and walked out of the hall, squinting his beard. He is looking for a poor senior sister. Looking for business with you is just a bonus, and he is using you as a stepping stone. When opening the door, Fatty Yen lowered his head and did not look at the scene in the hall. When the door was closed, Yanzhua looked up again and asked a very pragmatic question. Lord, can you tell me the truth? I will tell him. Partnership, can you really make a lot of money? Daochong's son nodded and said, yes. Yanzhua was relieved when he heard the words. As long as it's not a liar, it's always a good thing to know a few more people of this kind and to have a familiar face. Sun Daochong smiled and said, this Long Xingpu doesn't like to stay on the mountain and practice well. He likes to run into the rivers and lakes to stir the water. After a long time, those with shallow eye sockets are honored as Longshi, just with Lin Jiangxian. Compared with that Master Lin, the gold content is a bit far behind. Anyway, Long Xingpu has a thick skin. Even if there is someone who is not afraid of death, he is willing to call him Longzhong instruct, he dare to accept it. That old Taoist with the pseudonym Qingling, real name Long Xingpu, was an old ancestor of Bingjie Mountain in Yongzhou. And if calculated by seniority, he was still the grand ancestor of the contemporary mountain lord. Bingjie Mountain is one of the top hills in Yongzhou. As the only remaining old man of the same generation in Bingjie Mountain, he claims to have prestige in the martial art and has a thin face outside. But here in Bingjie Mountain the atmosphere is rather strange. The monks are not very old. There is the saying that 1,000 years of calamity, and it is not that the older you are, the more you can fight. Because the monks over there are not long enough, so this person's seniority actually took a big advantage. Otherwise, it should be said that in the sects of Xuandu Temple and Keishishan, there is a great ancestor who is the master of the monk and the sect master. Don't scare people to death. After all, if you can live for 5,000 to 6,000 years, where can your realm be so low? This Long Xingpu of Bingjishan was from the same hometown as his senior sister, or the same year, and both came from a small place in Yongzhou. But when it comes to realm, cultivation aptitude and fighting ability, it's 1,000 miles worse than my senior sister. The boy dangled outside, not starving to death, nor being beaten to death, just relying on a mouth. The 3 falls in a row are all caused by the failure of the mouth. Yanzhua asked curiously, this senior is the senior sister who is rushing to watch the Lord? Is there any talk here? Daochong's son stared. Don't ask if you shouldn't. If your kid talks messily with a big mouth and doesn't care about anything like a junior with your sister's temper, then the senior sister will go back to clean up. It will be a poor way. Back then when Dao was not old it was nothing, but now he is the master of one view anyway. It is a little bit of face, and it's unreasonable to reach out with his hand and cover half of his face every day. Sun Daochong walked out of this forbidden area of Vipassana, and asked casually, how do you feel when you go out? Yanzhua sighed with emotion. The majestic and prestigious, I am popular wherever I go. It is very good, and it is not in vain. Not as good as me. In fact, this is due to the recommendation of the young hermit. Otherwise, Fatty Yen, who is covered in bronze and smelly in the well regulated by Yujing, on the road of making money, I am afraid that there are 18 kinds of martial arts and there is not much room for display. The status of Lin Jiangxian's Yashan in the Ruzhou relied on the large number of people and the strong support of the Jianghu sect of the Qijing dynasty. Yashan's direct martial artist, of course, can walk sideways in the mountains and rivers of that continent. And Xian Du Guan is well deserved in this Qizhou. Unlike Yinzhou, the 2 Jingshan and Dachao sects have faced each other since ancient times, and their forces are the same. Of course, today is different. The 2 families have become a family, and they are still the kind of family literally. In the marriage of the sects on the mountain, Most of the disciples looked at each other right and then tied the knot. How can two masters of the sect become a Taoist couple? This is indeed the first time in the Qingming world. There is also a harvesting mountain in Juzhou, which competes with the Qingxi Palace, one of the ancestral courts of the Taoist Fulu. Even on the side of Yuzhou there is a Shoshan pavilion which is able to match the Huayang Palace of the Earth Lung Mountain. It's hard to say who is the dominant family. In Yongzhou there are Xianzhang faction and Bingjishan, two top sect immortal palaces, always vying for the position of the leader of the state. Of course, Bai Yujing was the master of the entire Qingming world. Even if it was Xuantuguan, there was still a huge gap with it. It can even be said that all the sects in the Qingming world are Bai Yujing's outer door vassals. Yanzhua asked, "Old Guanzhu, can I do business with him?" Sun Daochang hummed, "It's up to you, money comes and goes, it's just business, there is no taboo here." What's more, the old grudge between Xuandu Guan and Bingjishan from Sun Weishong's point of view, is not deadlocked. It is just that the contemporary mountain lord of Bingjishan has his brains, and he refuses to come out. Daochang's son asked, "Do you really like making money so much?" Yanzhua smiled and said, "I like it when I was young. I like it when I was young. Besides practicing swordsmanship, I have to find something to do to help distract. Daochang's son nodded, "It's pretty good. If there is a chance through this transaction the two parties can ease the relationship, and in the future I recommend Yanzhua to serve as the deacon of the accountant of the ancestral court of Xian Duguan. Anyway, I also have a talk. In order to avoid being called nepotism, Xian Duguan has no shortage of sweeping Taoists for the time being." Daochang's son said, "You go call Di Yuanfeng and Zhang Qing and go out with Pin Dao for a relaxing time." Yanzhua nodded and agreed, and then he went to call the two lucky guys with deep blessings. Yanzhua asked tentatively, "Should I fly the sword to send a letter to the old Bingjishan?" Daochang's son shook his head and said, "No. Last time Sun Daochang traveled far away from the aperture and once again traveled through the vast world. Finally he collected two direct disciples from Luzhou and Beiju, and they were included in the universe in the sleeves together, and brought back the Xuandu temple. It was just a personal pass and name, and a few Dao books and a few fairy tactics were lost to them. In fact, it was the upper 5-level Daoist like concierge Han Zhanran who really taught swordsmanship and Dao tactics for the double. According to Sun Daochang, he should be preaching to others' master. Poor Dao has a shortcoming. You can teach genius, but you can't teach stupid people. How dare those two young people from outside of Luzhou North Guizhou have any complaints? I only feel that being able to have a relationship with a thunderous fifth person in the world, even if it is only in the name of a teacher and apprentice, is already a great blessing for the ancestral grave, and I dare not expect more. Moreover, as long as it is a Taoist priest of Xuandu Guan's ancestral veins, he can practice with peace of mind. At least no one has to worry about being bullied outside. In the arms of the old master grandson, it is like a towering ancient tree, sheltering all the Taoist priests from the wind and rain. Yanzhua went to find Di Yuanfeng and Zhang Qing, and said that your master had made a decree, asking us to accompany his old man to go out and relax. People are more popular than others. These two people of the same age as the direct descendants of the old Buddhist masters have a lawless seniority in the Xuandu temple, and they have made an exception to practice in Taolin Jiamao. To Di Yuanfeng, when they saw this fatty yen, they didn't dare to have any underestimating thoughts. Without saying anything, they immediately followed Yanzhua to see master. In their hometown of Luzhou, Beiju, at a site of an immortal mansion, Di Yuanfeng and Zhang Qing had personally learned how to act in a non-human style. It's no wonder that you can be called fellow Qin Shaodao by your own master. Only when they later learned that the other party turned out to be the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, they began to rejoice for their rest of life, and the blessings in disguise, and cherish the now stable years of cultivation. Yanzhua smiled and said, "In the future Qin Pingon came to Xian Duguan. The three of you are really old friends reunited, and you still have to have a good drink? Do you have any ideas about this drink? I can help you prepare a few celestial immortals early. Home wine, the price, it's easy to say, the original price is guaranteed." Di Yuanfeng didn't speak up. Zhang Qing smiled and said, "If you dare to love it, brother Lao Yen will bother too much." In fact, the first meeting with Di Yuanfeng and the others was also the first time Qin Pingon took the courage after he strayed into the Blessed Lotus route and took the initiative to learn from the monk on the mountain to enter the mysterious land of mountains and rivers, seek ways to visit immortals and pursue opportunities. If you only look at the results, Qin Pingon has certainly gained a lot, but the danger of the process is indeed a lingering fear. In addition to this, Qin Pingon was tantamount to invisibly taking on a cause and effect of considerable weight. In the small Taoist temple on the top of the mountain, there is a middle-aged Taoist Peachwood statue enshrined. This person's true identity is the younger brother of Taoist Master Sun of Xuandu Temple. Personally asked Dao and Zhenxian Duguan, the person who died under the truly invincible sword was this Xian Duguan Taoist official. And this person's direct disciple Song Maolu is a Taoist who is known as Blue is better than blue. According to the truth of Hulong on Tianfushui Island in Longgong Shaodong, this Taoist priest who belonged to the master-nephew of Laoguan, once used Yongzhou as his base camp and gathered nearly 60% of the Taoist Dharma veins outside of Baiyujing. This statement, of course, will have a certain amount of moisture. Because the small group of sects and immortals, the world's top sects, did not really form an alliance with Sung Maolu back then. There may be a contract in private, but at least on the face of it there is no alliance with Yongzhou, but even so, it is enough to shock the world, just like the real person of the fire dragon used a metaphor at the time. Can contend with half of Confucianism and compete with the Chinese Confucian temple. Ansong Malus Master Sun Daochang's Jr., the Peachwood statue of this old Taoist priest in the ascending realm, is now the key to the wooden house, one of Qin Ping's 5 elements natal creatures. Except for Di Yuanfeng and Zhang Qing, who were received by the old masters in their sleeves, it was like a rooster and dog ascending to heaven, turning into a rainbow and flying into the sky. In fact, she almost became the old master of the willows in Kaik Mansion. His personal disciple. Yanzhua was curious and said, "When will our brothers have a little wine? Tell me how they met Qin Pingan during the trip back then." Because of Qin Pingan, Yanzhua is very close to them. As for what these two people think, Fatty Yen doesn't care. Zhang Qing agreed with a smile, saying that of course it was okay, but Di Yuanfeng felt helpless. He really didn't want to mention the old, cunning, money-making good man. Di Yuanfeng, who fell in his family back then, wore an ancestral sword on his waist. He once enshrined him with a family from a frontier military commander and learned some swordsmanship. He once used the identity of Qin Jiyuan of Jiuyou country. Of course, it was the latter who planted the blame and spilled dirty water. Along the way I met Sun Daochang, Huang Shi and others, and several unwelcome Shanzi Yeshio, worked together to seek for money, and walked through the secret realm of Xianfu. Di Yuanfeng tied his head to the waistband of his trousers. Desperate to be rich and rich. On the other hand, Zhang Qing, as the young master of Baiting Elementary School, is a well-known romantic and thin lover. At the beginning he used bamboo sticks and mango shoes, a mutton jade flute around his waist, and a pair of noble sons carrying the hidden root. The bamboo stick of a soft sword, accompanied by a beautiful woman, is simply a trip to the mountains and rivers. As for the old masters, why are they willing to accept them as disciples and bring them back to the Qingming world? Zhang Qing and Di Yuanfeng are still at a loss. The old real people of the upper 5 realms called uncle and uncle, and even were respectfully called that great uncle and uncle. It's just that the relationship between the two people in the same family is actually normal now. After all, the two sides have never been the same. Different ways, of course, they just think so. Zhang Qing asked cautiously, "Brother Yen the hermit, as a foreigner, how did he get a foothold on the Great Wall of Jianqi in the first place?" Yanzhua thought about it seriously, then laughed and said, "Treat people with sincerity." When Fatty Yen went to call someone, Dao Chang's son found his senior sister Wang's son, and asked tentatively, "The Long Xinpu in Bingjishan has come to the door. Do you want to see him?" The girl's graceful female crown said with a calm expression, "If the other party is under the guise of retelling the old from the same country, it will be avoided. But if you think that he is here to discuss things with our Xuandu and it is more important anyway, you are the one to watch. Or it doesn't matter to me." Dao Chang's son asked, "If the other party has both, what is good?" Wang's son said, "Of course it's official business rather than private business. It's okay to meet each other." Son Daochang was relieved, was silent for a moment and said with no reason, "Senior sister, our master, is a person who has a good night." As the master of Sun Daochang and senior sister Wang's son, the old Taoist priest with the Taoist name Qingyun, is dead and is dead without disease. A few apprentices are all considered promising. If they leave a few hundred years later they may be worried. Wang's son nodded and said, "Fortunately, master can walk away, Otherwise we will live a few more years, and we will be mad at death by the few of us. Even when it comes to Master Wang Sun still has no taboo when talking. Sun Daochang smiled and said, one by one, you were not willing to take over the position of master. I have always suspected that master chose me back then. Did master sister talk to master secretly? If there is no evidence, stop talking nonsense. Sitting under the peach tree, Wang Sun stretched out his hand to hold a long sword in its sheath and taught, the junior is not big or small. Sun Daochang laughed blithely. At that time, there were as many as 7 children who were appointed as the master of the Buddhist temple by Xuandu Guan, the leader of the Qingyuan Daoist, and were led by the old true man into the Buddhist temple at the same time. There were only 7 children, and as a result only ascended cultivators were among them, and then there were 3. In addition to the grandson who had just left the customs, the current master son Huizhong, and the younger brother of both parties who liked to hold a mountain stick and carry a scorpion, come from a small place rich in loquats, born in poverty, named Huanggan and later said, Green Li. The 3 fellow students, son Huizhong, senior sister Wang Sun and junior brother Huanggan, all entered the Ascension realm one after another, and they also served as the abbots of Xuandu Temple. Therefore, the year when he took office as the master and finally accepted his disciples was also regarded by later generations as a big year, in the history of Xuantuguan, the most abundant year. Even if it is placed in the heavy old almanac pages in the entire Qingming world, it is destined to be a rich stroke. Therefore, the old scholar took a child with a tiger head hat last time as a guest Xuandu Temple, so he made a special trip to this patriarch's hall to respect 3 sticks of incense to the former master. Both the people on the hanging statues and the pilgrims outside the hanging statues are good at accepting disciples. In addition, the closed disciples of the old scholars and the younger disciples who took up the post of the master also have a great relationship. This is very good. The master of Xuandu Temple Yunhe was named Qingyuan. The first time an old Taoist officially preached to the disciples who entered the room, he threw a book of Taoist ancestors with only 5,000 words to the children. And Wang Sun just read the opening 6 words of, Tao can be Tao is very Tao, and she closed the book. That year he was only an old Taoist priest who served as one of the 3 capitals in Xiandu Temple, and he nodded and smiled. Let her play. The little girl who was still wearing 2 croissants at that time jumped out of the house and went to play alone. Only son Huizhong and his fellow brothers were left, all with big eyes and small eyes, and they were shocked by the heavens. Son Huizhong asked the senior sister afterwards what was going on. At that time the sister's explanation was that I didn't know how to read, so the master threw a book to me. Son Huizhong really believed him, young and ignorant, young and ignorant. Indeed, her hometown is the elder sister Wang Sun from Yongzhou. Her family has been snake catchers for generations, and it is not surprising that she has never read to read. On the other hand, son Huizhong, most of them with good backgrounds in practice, don't even talk about literacy, but they have memorized a lot of Taoism in various veins. The whole Taoist is hidden. It was many years before son Huizhong knew the truth. It turned out that the senior sister just thought that the younger brother little grandson, who had just met for a short time no matter how young, was a cultivator. She could ask such idiot questions. Looks pitiful. She just found a lame excuse to comfort him. Anyway, in those years, every time the senior sister saw son Huizhong, her eyes were extremely kind, and she never kept her face cold. Mostly she was treated like a poor little fool who needed her. Since then, Wang Sun's path of cultivation has been extremely smooth, and the situation has broken like a bamboo. It's completely crushing his peers. Ichi Juechen can only look at the ascending back of that king and grandson from a distance. Over time, all Taoist priests of the Hui character generation in Xianduguan recognized their fate. There is no way to compare, so don't compare with Wang Sunday. Discuss Taoism, discuss justice, and no one will look for that grandson. Wang Sun first crushed his peers, then caught up with the teachers, and then the 2 generations on the top of the emblem. Among them there are many amazing cultivating geniuses, but they are all surpassed by Wang Sun one by one. It is no joke to say that later generations commented on Wang Sun's general corner. As a younger brother Huanggan, who is second only to Wang Sun in cultivation, the saying "be a god" before entering the Xiandu temple was the one with the slowest cultivation. As for son Huizhong, during those carefree years of cultivating, he thought that he was not good enough to be good, and he was not so outstanding. Since there are senior sister Wang's son genius and not genius, it is meaningless. As for later, he was said to be it's a late bloomer and it's accumulating and it sounds like a curse. On Xuanduguan's ancestral court, after the generation of Taoist priests with the emblems of the emblem grew up, Xuanduguan, as the leader of the world's Taoist sword and immortal family, is actually a famous mountain in Qizhou. Mountain, a secluded monastery, does not stain the world and has very little contact with the outside world. When the Taoist officials of the Hui character generation began to grow into the backbone of the Xuandu temple, they occupied important positions in the Taoist temple. Often there are fellow students who have suffered a loss. Wang's son waved his big hand, and it was the dozens of monks of the same age who secretly traveled far away with his teachers behind his back. Son Huaizhong took the lead every time. The younger brother Huang Gan was the strategist, and the senior sister Wang's son Cici responsible for dealing with those with high levels and letting her clean up the mess. For example, after returning to the Taoist temple, she talked with the elders of the teachers and elders. After the training, she had to think about it. Being confined to Taolin together, this is called the same difficulty. After son Huaizhong emerged from the Hui character generation and unexpectedly became the abbot of Xuandu Guan, for thousands of years, under Sun Guanz's acquiescence and even secretly adding to the flames, the Taoist priests of Xuandu Guanjian's lineage were the favorite and the best at them. The style of single challenge has even been carried forward to its apex. The dozens of exquisite sword formations in Xianduguan are magnificent. How did they come? Of course they came from a field fight. And from the young grandson, the young master, and then the old master, those stinky problems have to be put in a more fair way. They are some good traditions that are well known to passers-by. Come to draw a gourd with Sister Wang Suani. For example, hit someone as early as possible. Qingping Jianzong, the first meeting of the Patriarch Hall. There is a coffee table next to the chair, and a bowl of tea and a plate of melon seeds are placed on it. It seems that it will become a certain kind of rule in the discussion of the Patriarch Hall in the future. Chao Qingqing and Pei Qian are responsible for carrying the pot and pouring tea, and the millet grains are responsible for dividing the seeds. The little girl in black has a very serious look. How can it be the total number of seeds in each plate? She has to ensure that the accuracy of a single seed is not bad. I stayed with Pei Qian last night to stay alive. She practiced for a long time, but she still felt that it was not safe enough. At most, the error was within 2 or 3 melon seeds. Anxious, Pei Qian helped her think of a seamless way and she took it out. When there is an error in the melon seeds, Pei Qian's eyes indicate the millet grains. The signal is 2 to 2 and a reminder that one is missing. Ah, perfect. Qin Pingan took the lead in knocking on the melon seeds, and the good person mountain master quickly saw the way. Very good, there are 3 more than the others, and sure enough the millet grains are still very towards him. Jia Sheng sat in the most righteous position. The old gods thought that the first meeting of the Patriarch's Hall for the establishment of the sect was not his own. He never thought that Qin Shanju was still so obsessed and Cui was still so respectful. Qiudu is not much better than old Immortal Jia. In fact, besides Jia Sheng and the old woman, Yao Xinji is the most awkward one. He half-joked with Mr. Qin to ask for the status of the next guest. He didn't take it too seriously. He never wanted to be a famous guest. There is a fixed seat in Qingping Feng Patriarch Hall. As for Tao Jianxian, of course he didn't doze off. Everyone is more casual. It's not like just pretend to chat with the family behind closed doors, it's just that. Qin Pingan picked up the tea bowl, paused for a moment as if he had felt it and smiled and said, I must admit that we have a very righteous atmosphere and everyone has credit. Slightly cold, Qin Pingan originally planned to put down a sentence. Since everyone in the room didn't speak, it was acquiescence, very good, and began to discuss matters. Fortunately, the old fairy Jia had a sincere expression on his face and took the lead to break the silence and said in a deep voice, it's a must. So Cui Dongshan, Pei Qian and Chao Sunny all stared at the old fairy Jia. Qin Pingan stood up suddenly. At the gate of Qingping Feng Mountain, out of thin air, there was a woman in a red cotton-padded jacket with flying brows, with a wine gourd hanging on her waist, holding a horse in one hand and beckoning and shouting, Little Master. Sort of coming. Chapter 959. Wearing a green shirt, it instantly swept out of the Zhou like a green waterfall, flowing from the top of Qingping Peak to the gate of the mountain. Cui Dongshan licked melon seeds and smiled. The discussion is put on hold. Let's just drink tea for a while. Pei Qian originally wanted to follow the master to meet Li Baoping at the gate of the mountain, but the big white goose smiled and shook her head at her. Qiu Du, Tao Ran, the members of the Patriarch's Hall who had just gone up the mountain for a short time, and Yi Yunyun and other guest officials would naturally feel strange. I don't know where it is sacred. It is worthy of Qin Shan's hiss, invigorating and moving people. It seems that great things can be temporarily put aside. I went straight to the foot of the mountain without saying a word, and even the effort of talking in the ancestor hall was not willing to waste. This was not like Qin Pingan's usual style. Suddenly Cui Dongshan's eyes lit up. Master Sister, I know the greatest contributor to the origin of our downfall mountain style. Pei Qian stared. Don't get involved with Sister Aquarius. The younger generation of Luopashan are either afraid of Cui Dongshan or Pei Qian. However, children like Bai Xian who entered the Luopa mountain very late may not be very clear. Whether it is Big White Goose or Pei Qian, it will be different on someone's side. Cui Dongshan was once stamped on his head by that person holding a seal. When he was a child, he was able to deceive a few old catchers of the money, and he was also willing to be that person's little attendant, often copying books together. As for Li Huai, when I was studying in a small town and rural school, my rompers were thrown into a tree, crying with tears and snot. The key is not to remember that person's hatred. At the gate of the mountain, Qin Pingan fell to the ground with a bright smile. Li Baoping grinned and said, Little Master, Happy New Year. A woman in a red cotton-padded jacket holding a green bamboo stick, wearing a narrow knife auspicious charm, and a white wine gourd hanging from her waist. She is slender and she is a big girl. Qin Pingan glanced at the sword-raising gourd and Li Baoping said with a face, Uncle Master, I don't drink often and occasionally I'm tired of reading. Refresh my mind, move to rescue soldiers with the wine bug, go to fight with the sleepy bugs, win. Lose more and less. Qin Pingan laughed softly. What's this? Little Shirshu is almost a drunkard. Let's go, Xiao Shirshu will take you up the mountain for a walk. Today is just a sect celebration. Let's go to the ancestral hall for a while. If you have something to talk about, you should make up for the ceremony. The mountain under our feet is called Xiandu Mountain, and the two next to it are Yunjing Mountain and Sumiao Mountain, both named by your brother Cui. Li Baoping nodded vigorously and then she pointed to the Zhongmen plaque. Qingping Jianzong, the name is especially good, the wind is born on the ground and it starts at the end of Qingping. It is the blue that is better than the blue and it is also a leaf. Duckweed returns to the sea. Where can we not meet in life? It has a lot of meaning and beauty. It is really difficult for Brother Cui to think of such a good name. It is estimated that he had a chance to come up with such a good name. Qin Pingan smiled and said, the name of the sect was taken by the little uncle himself. Li Baoping's beautiful and smart eyes narrowed into crescent moons, and sighed deliberately, oh, nothing unexpected. Qin Pingan was about to reach out to help lead the horse. Li Baoping quickly shook his head and said, it doesn't need to go up the mountain, it's better to stay at the foot of the mountain. Today is the sect celebration of the little uncle. I also have to trouble little master to find a broom and dustpan. Qin Pingan couldn't help but said, what a big deal. Li Baoping picked up the green bamboo stick and waved his big hand, be stubborn. Horseshoes were in a row, looking at the direction they went to Luobaotan to drink water. Inside the Patriarch Hall, Cui Dongshan kept his head tilted and listened. Hearing this he smiled at Pei Qian. What do you say? Not convinced. Qin Pingan took Li Baoping and walked slowly on the mountain road and the two climbed up the stairs. When the woman in the red cotton-padded jacket suddenly appeared, the Yu Panshui on the top of Qingping Peak was taken aback. This is not a shrunken mountain river in the ordinary sense. Coming from the continent, I'm shallow and it's hard to watch the excitement. Brother Jubao, your realm is high so you can weigh it up? Lu Jubao's performance was a bit weird. He just looked at the scene of Wu Chao Peak at Yunjing Mountain, turning a blind eye to the woman leading the horse at the foot of the mountain, and turning a deaf ear to friends' inquiries. Yu Panshui muttered to himself, is it really a cross-continental journey this can bring a horse? The legendary house soaring does not have this vision of heaven and earth. It can actually be able to hold the Middle-earth god continent. The luck of the mountains, rivers and temperament is strange. Why do I still look at the Daoqi of Suishan in the Middle-earth? Today who can food from the tiger's mouth on the side of the mountain monarch's travels, I can hear my ears. Zhou Xian, who is named Dejiao, has a bad temper. There are only a handful of the gods of mountains and rivers in the world who can possess the title of god. According to the latest regulations of the Confucian Temple, for the time being, Only the 5 sacred mountains of the Middle Earth and the King of the 4 Seas have this honor. Lu Yuzhou said in his heart. It seems to be Li Baoping from Xianxia Academy. I heard that she and Zhulin Shi from the Chidu Temple in Beipingzu, as well as the wise Li Huai, are both direct disciples of Mr. Qi. Li Baoping seems to be she liked to wear red clothes when she was a child. Apart from studying, she likes to travel alone. Not long ago, she passed the examination at the School of Rites and was already a Confucian gentleman. Li Baoping had a relationship with Yuan Yu of Hengku Academy. During a debate, my friend on the mountain and I borrowed the beautiful rubbings, but I didn't understand what they were arguing about. According to seniority, Master Hermit could indeed be regarded as her little uncle. Since Li Baoping is Master Wenxing disciple of the second pass, Master Wenxing has been in a good relationship with Zhou Xian. Can't it be Zhou Xianjun who sent her here personally? Yu Panshui suddenly said, it turned out to be her, that's how it is, no wonder it's no wonder. Lu Jubao still didn't take the bait. Traveling around can indeed send people to other continents, but the noise made will definitely not be so small. If it is really the magical method on the Suishan side, according to the earliest definition of the magic technique by Mr. Sanshan Jiuho, then contact Li Baoping's current cultivation level. If you want to cross continents, you need to use several ancient magical powers in one breath, move mountains and scenery, set yourself up on fire to calm your soul and use wind and water. When Li Baoping's feet landed, the entire Xindu mountain boundary would be shaken, and the price Suishan paid was destined to be not small. It would definitely consume a part of Suishan Dao Qi, but with his traveling style this famous man moved the world. Divine Sovereign is recognized as selfless, and no matter how good the relationship with Wenxing is, he will not be so fake for his own sake. Obviously there is another expert and only talking about the opponent's hand, it can be regarded as the 14th realm cultivation base. So this is why Lu Jubao deliberately pretended that he hadn't seen anything. There were only a few monks in the 14 realms in the world. On Tongyi's Hao, there was a cave master of Luobaotan Bixiao from the Taoist temple of the East China Sea earlier. I have gone to the Qingming world to open up a dojo. Because the Old View Master's own harmony is located, the Old View Master will be forced to share the time, place and harmony in the wild world, the less the world will be. Taiping, this will make the old Guanz's cultivation base drop again and again. In case Aquarius can't keep it, maybe it will be difficult for the old Guanju to get out of it. Dominate your head. A monk with the nickname Chicken Soup Monk, Xinqing also went to the Western Buddhist countries. It is very likely that he quietly launched the 4th session of the road. The old blind man stayed in the 100,000 mountains without moving his nest, and Bai was also in Xuandu Temple. As for the dragon slasher who returned to the 14th realm, he was always lonely and wild. Then it is very likely that there is already an invisible monk of the 14th realm in the vast world, or a brand new 14th realm will soon be added. Some things must be pretended not to be known. Yupanshui's realm is not high but Yupu realm, but there is vision. It is impossible to know this. Moreover, the origin of the change in the Lizhu cave at the time, based on the relationship between Yupanshui and Xiuhu, cannot be it's a complete outsider. Yupanshui glanced at the god of wealth of Aii Zhou, who was a dull gourd, and tweeted, as expected, Brother Jubao, he is a good man, no wonder I earn more money than me, so much more. Fatty Yu has always been curious, is it possible for the Brother Jubao around him to make money, such as earning half of the god's money in Hauran? But it's not right. Lu Jubao's ability to make money is indeed the best in the world, but spending money is not an ordinary lavish. But Lu Jubao is trying to spend money in exchange for the merits of the Confucian Temple Merit Book, which is not very similar. In fact, Yu Panshui has always felt that he can't see through the person around him. The longer he gets along with Lu Jubao, he will always feel uncomfortable looking at flowers in the fog. Thoroughly, it's just that the two of them have too good brains and their chess skills are too high, but in the final analysis, some contexts are still relatively clear. For example, Cui Yang can do the rebellious deceit and destroy the ancestor in the eyes of the world, and he can betray the Wenxing line. But Cui Yang will never give up his identity as a scholar in his mind. Jing Juzhong, even with the identity of the world's first giant of the magic road, his thoughts are extremely high and profound, but in the bones of Jing Juzhong, it will still give you Panshui a pure and mellow feeling. Of course, it may be an illusion that Jing Juzhong deliberately made him feel Yu Panshui. As for Lu Jubao, it is not true. On the contrary, it makes Yu Panshui the most puzzled. He is not sure what Lu Jubao wants to do. It seems that some of the biggest truths have been concealed by Lu Jibao's facts of making money. Lu Jubao smiled indifferently. It will take a long time to see people's hearts. When the world is really peaceful, you will know the use of my money. Be careful in earning money and spend generously. No matter how much money you have, you always enter and exit from the front door. To earn money, don't delay in accumulating virtue. Otherwise, the more nights go and the more you can accumulate, the easier things will happen, and it will bring harm to children and grandchildren. It is hard to earn money in the world, and it is even harder to accumulate zuinfu. Yu Panshui said with emotion. There are more people who can make money, and there are very few people who really know how to spend money. When you are poor and white, you can earn some money to make a fortune. There is nothing wrong with it. When you have money, you have to earn money. Otherwise, morality is not worthy. Sitting on the golden mountain and silver mountain, the fortune and the misfortune will only be converted overnight, and the money will be collected by the predecessors and the future generations. Probably just like Cui Yang said back then. The big money is brought in the previous life and the book is for the next life. Lu Jubao looked at the two people who had already started climbing and said, let's go and take a look at Zhang Xianfeng. On the mountain road, Li Baoping said, Uncle Master, don't let the patriarch hall wait for a long time. Talking about things is important. Qin Pingan smiled and nodded. Li Baoping then climbed the mountain and walked like flying. Qin Pingan followed him unhurriedly. When I arrived at Qingping Peak's Master Hall, Xiao Mili had already prepared a chair early. Following Cui Dongshan's suggestion, he moved the chair to the position between Hao Ren Shanzhu and Pei Qian. If the rules are not the rules, the etiquette and other things will go aside first. Li Baoping first bowed with everyone. Self-registration number, Li Baoping, a disciple of Xianxia Academy. She glanced at the position of her chair and shook her head towards the little uncle. Qin Pingan moved the chair back, but not alone in the back row. In this way, Li Baoping was regarded as a courtesy and also a family member. Pei Qian smiled and called Sister Aquarius to help pour a bowl of tea. Mili touched his sweat on his forehead, and took the courage to put a pile of melon seeds like a small hill for the legendary lord from the cotton shoulder bag. He whispered, My lord, Sister Aquarius, my name is Zhou Mili. The right guardian of Qilong Alley is now the deputy rudder of Qilong Alley under Longquan County's general rudder. Pei Qian wanted to dig a hole in the ground. Li Baoping was stunned, but she quickly smiled and said, Make more efforts. If it hadn't been mentioned by the little black girl today, Li Baoping would have forgotten the token of the leader of the rudder who had been given to Pei Qian a long time ago. When Qin Pingan took his seat, the Zhu Shitang continued to discuss matters. The first thing is that Cui Dongshan set rules for Qingping Jianzong. In the future, the Zhu Shitang will accept newcomers. In the future, the threshold for every seat in Qingping Feng Zhu Shitang will not be low. The monk must be the nascent soul, the sword repair must be the golden core, and the wufu must be the far travel realm. And it's not that after this line you can definitely have a seat, you also have to look at the records on the merit book. The second thing is the arrangement of the respective dojo. The chief enshrines Miyu, the direct disciple He Gu, who lives with the flying sword Feilai Peak. And the Taoist temple is built on the Yunshang Peak of Xiandu Mountain. Zhanglu Tue, disciple Yu Xianhui, whose real name is Feijin Pozi Ling. The dojo is built on the Tianbian Peak of Xiandu Mountain with cacti. On the right of Sui, the disciple Chung Chaolu. The dojo is at the Banxian Peak of the secondary peak of Xiandu Mountain, sweeping the flower platform. Tao Ran is a sword repairer in the Golden Core realm, and the dojo is at the Vermilion Peak of Xiandu Mountain. The 4 members of the Patriarch Hall happen to be Jianxiu, so the dojo was all serving as the Xiandu Mountain of Qingping Sword Sect Ancestor Mountain. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, Tao Jianxian, no one will hold the opening ceremony for the time being. When you enter the nascent soul realm in the future, let's make up for Tao Jianxian and do a big deal. Tao Ran nodded silently without objection. As for the nascent soul realm, dreaming is just fine. It is best if there is no special Jindan Peak opening ceremony so that you don't have to be ashamed of Xiandu Mountain. Cui Dongshan shook his sleeves and clouds rose on the ground of the Zhu Shitang, and a picture of the landscape situation appeared. It was the 2 auxiliary mountains of the Yunjing Mountain and the Chomiao Mountain. There are different vermilion characters floating above the peaks, marking the names of the peaks. Cui Dongshan said, Master, apart from keeping the Mixifeng mansion on Xiandu Mountain, I suggest that you move to Yunjing Mountain as the place where you really handle affairs. And this Yunjing Mountain I will serve as the first mountain. The Lord, the main peak of Chaofeng, is also my Taoist place. Don't think it's a cultivator. If you are a cultivator, you should receive a few disciples. In addition, there is still one thing that needs to be done. The troubled master is distracted, because I plan to start construction in the near future to set up a private academy in Mt. Chumiao and invite master to be the first head of the academy. Zhong Qiu smiled and said, "It's all okay." Cui Dongshan asked, "Master sister, are you planning to open the peak alone on Xindu Mountain or Yunzhong Mountain?" Pei Qian said without hesitation, "It's in Yunjing Mountain." She glanced at the map and continued, "I will build a hut near the fishing pavilion in Qingzujian." Qin Pingon said suddenly, "Yunjingshan, the Mingtin peak over there, please allocate it to me." Pei Qian pursed his mouth tightly. In a sense, both the master and the apprentice had learned boxing with the same person. And the old man who stayed on the second floor of the bamboo building all the year round had a punch called Yunzhong Days style. So whether it was Pei Qian choosing the Yunzhengshan fishing pavilion or Qin Pingan's initiative to ask to occupy the Mingtin peak, it was a kind of tacit understanding between the master and the disciple. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "Chao Qingqing came to serve as the first peak owner of Mount Sumyo Mountain Star, Jindan State, to open the peak according to the routine. It is not a bad rule. As for the first mountain owner of Sumyo Mountain, it is temporarily suspended." Wu Go Xiaomenying, your dojo is located next to the ladder road of Mt. Myo. You can call Fulu Lisher by yourself for the construction of a mansion later. A fellow Daoist, the dojo is in Yuanping on Mt. Sumyo. The height of this peak is second only to Wuxia Peak. The scenery is still quite good, how about it? Qing Tong nodded with a smile, clasped his fists and said, "Thanks to Sect Master Cui in advance." As a guest, even a chief guest like Huang Ting as usual, cannot open the peak alone and have no mountain tops to occupy. At most there is a mansion in the mountain, but a fairy mansion or a sect dedicated to the name is not the case. Except for Yuanping in Qingtong, Lao Qiuchudu was arranged by Cui Dongshan on Pasuo Peak of Sumyo Mountain, which is also the water source of Sumyo Mountain. Obviously, Cui Dongshan's vision is to practice swordsmanship at the peaks of the ancestral mountain. Pure Takeo in Yunzongshan. Qi trainers other than Jian Xiu cultivated the Taoism in Mt. The old woman bit her scalp and said, "Qin Shanju, Hu Chuling and I are not strictly masters and apprentices. Can she apprentice with you to learn art?" For this old Dragon Palace teacher, her cultivation achievements are far inferior to the smooth practice of jealousy. There is a good master who is honest and good and a great backer. The reason why Qiudu was so nervous, of course, involves the generation that the monks on the mountain often value most. If the vinegar can really become Qin Ping's direct disciple, it is equivalent to the same generation as Cui Dongshan. This is not what it is to climb the sky. Therefore Qiudu even made a plan similar to working for Xindu Mountain. As long as Qin Pingon didn't say anything to death, the old woman would immediately speak up and submit a contract similar to life and death, and this kind of thing is absolutely not a child's play. Qin Pingon shook his head and said, "I will retreat as soon as I come. After I leave the customs I will go out for a long trip. Hu Chuling and I have been apprentices. For a long time I may not even be able to see me, so naturally I will teach more. Nothing about her. Besides, the only things I can tell are swordsmanship and martial arts, which are not suitable for Hu Chuling. If you want to talk about Fulu, I barely understand the way, but if Hu Chuling really wants to learn and can learn, I can be here. Regarding the guarantee with Qiu in the future, as long as I am with Qingping Jianzong, Hu Chuling wants to ask Fulu about it. Just ask me and he will give it all. In fact, there is no need to go near and farther about Hu Chuling's apprenticeship." Cui Dongshan immediately smiled and said, "If Qiu Gongfeng doesn't dislike it, I can be Hu Chuling as the preacher of the Qingping Feng Patriarch's Hall." Qin Pingon explained with a smile, "Cui Dongshan is a fairyland, and with the exception of martial arts, it is the only shortcoming of our sect Master Cui. In addition, almost every aspect is better than my husband. Hu Chuling and him learned from the teacher. Maybe in addition to a lower seniority in the mountains, in fact compared to becoming my disciple following Cui Dongshan's cultivation in the long run, Hu Chuling will have more benefits and greater gains. Although Qiudu has little regrets, it is a great thing that vinegar can become a direct disciple of Cui Dongshan. It is nothing more than changing from the best to the second best, and the old woman is extremely content. Especially when Qin Pingon personally said that Cui Dongshan was a fairyland, Qiudu was even more impressed. A mountain top, a hidden dragon and a tiger. The background is bottomless, but so. Besides, Qin Pingon promised himself that he was willing to work with Hu Chuling to teach Fu Lu. Qiudu did not dare to make an inch. What's more, the young hermit looked gentle, but he spoke directly. For example, he would appeal to the generation issue. So the old woman, who thought she was guilty of ignorance, immediately stood up and thanked Qin Shanzhu and Cui sect master respectively. After taking the seat, the old woman hesitated for a moment, full of guilt, and said frankly, "The old man has been in the countryside for a long time. Selfish, seriously, this little abacus has made everyone read the jokes." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Mother Qiu, don't say that. You made a good start for our discussion of the Qingping sword sect Patriarch Hall." Qiu Du was confused when he heard it and made a good start. What does it mean? It's just that everyone seems to think that the young hermit's words are taken for granted. Old Immortal Jia immediately followed. He is calm and speaks his own words. Qiu Gongfeng dares to openly say that he is selfish, and the poor Dao feels that selfishness is not important. The millet grains with two faint eyebrows kept frowning. After explaining this to the old fairy Jia, it really came to an understanding, clapping and applauding. Because of the topic that the old woman talked about, this happened to involve the third matter. Sect Master Cui himself was about to accept disciples. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "Hu Chuling and Jiang Chu, thank you. Cui Peanut Zhao Luan will become my personal disciples, recorded on the Qingping Peak Jinyu genealogy. As for who is the big disciple, don't worry, I will talk about it later." Qin Pingon wondered, Zhao Luan? Cui Peanut did not say that the girl was Cui Dongshan's long-lost sister, who turned to Qilong Alley by one hand. Even Cui Dongshan took thank you as a disciple. Qin Pingon didn't think there was anything. As for Jiang, he was the first in Luopa Mountain. A true monk Fulu, it is indeed a good thing that he can become the heir of Cui Dongshan, but Zhao Luan, this makes Qin Pingon angry. Qingping Jianzong as the next sect of Luopashan, Yu Cui Dongshan carry is digging the foot of the wall with a small endless. Because in the last celebration of the Laupa Mountain sect, in addition to Zhao Shu's next move to become the descendant of the mountain lord Qin Pingon, Zhao Luan, although not a direct disciple of Qin Pingon, is already a genealogical monk of the Laupa Mountain Jisa Peak. In addition, Zhao Luan now has an anonymous master. It is the white-haired boy in Qilong Alley. He was in the Great Wall of Jianqi prison under the alias of Frostfall. The latter is now on the side of Kou. Every day he calls himself the only handyman disciple in Luopa Mountain. It seems that he is not ashamed but also quite complacent. It is just a matter of the world. It is really a coincidence. Qin Pingon clearly remembers that he was in jail. The grass is not arrogant, it has made a mountain mistake. Little grass out of the mountain Chao-Tu shop? It is not uncommon for a gas trainer to have two or even several preachers in the mountains. It's just that the record of the Zushitang's golden and jade genealogy relates to the attribution of the Daoist lineage, and of course it is the only one. The cultivator, recognizing the ancestor and returning to the ancestor, is the most important thing. Just like the Qingming world, the Taoist officials, which line of the master's origin is, even if he has established a lifelong line of Taoism. Cui Dongshan grinned and said, "Sir, Zhao Luan has such a good cultivating qualifications staying in Luopa Mountain. It seems that there is not much to learn." Long Life smiled and said, "I don't think it is necessarily." Wei Wenlong said, "Sect Master Sia's words are inappropriate." The old fairy Jia just thought for a moment, and then said a sincere saying on both sides of the Xiangshan Xiazong. Pan Dao has been treating Zhao Luan as his own granddaughter all these years. If one girl came to Xindu Mountain to practice, in the end I feel unwilling to give up selfishness. It is really selfishness and selfishness. Qiu Du smiled knowingly when he heard the words, and suddenly felt a little relaxed. The old woman and the blind and unblind Taoist old cast their kind eyes. Cui Dongshan rolled his eyes. Can his mother sell him well with Qiu Du, by the way? Old Immortal Jia, yes, you can go to the private academy in Yunjing Mountain and become a scholar who specializes in teaching people's affection and sophistication. Because of disagreements regarding Zhao Luan's official master candidate, he still asked Zhao Luan's own wishes in accordance with the old rules of Luopashan. After discussing the candidates for Qingping Jianzong to protect the mountain, Cui Dongshan said that he would hurry up and get it done. At present, the only allies that have formally concluded an alliance with Qingping Jianzong are the Pushun, Tapingshan and Daquan dynasties for the time being. As for Yu Quzong, of course, it still depends on the husband's personal decision. On the bank of a big lake in Kuizhou, there is a large-scale Xianxia ferry named Zhuqiandu. Ting clouds pass, the lotus is born, the fish and crabs turn over the wild cattails, the sleeping ducks occupy the pitong, and they are startled to disperse and form a pair. In the bustling Xianxia ferry, a man with a burly figure, bowed his head and bowed his waist, quietly approached a young monk who was not short of money and asked softly, "Do you want a robe?" The young man's expression moved slightly and he asked in his heart, "What is the way? Is it new? Or the old robe, how new can it be?" In fact, this kind of obscure activity is not uncommon in the mountains. They are all products of unknown origin and wrong origin, but the price is much cheaper. The man lifted his chin and said, "You just watch it here. If you see someone you like, tell me that the price is the same, 2 small summer coins." The young monk was stunned by this sentence. The man said, "The seal of the emperor's jewelry is from Huang Shalongdi. Ask what the way, don't care who took it off, look back, brother, you wear the same thing on your body. You pick a place tonight. We will pay for the goods with one hand. I will take care to erase all the restrictions on the robe. If you don't worry, you can find an expert to help. Both buyers and sellers are at ease." The young monk said angrily, "Your brain is sick, you get away." The man sighed, "Selling is not righteous, so why do you curse?" The man moved away, apparently looking for the next customer. In a small county on the border between Kuizhou and Qizhou, it is said that a stranger came from a foreign country. He was dressed in a raccoon fur and a crown fox hat. This person is accompanied by 3 retinues, all of whom are qi practitioners. He has neither the status of a court official of a country nor the mountain and water genealogy of the fairy house on the mountain. Only the place and name of his ancestral home and the seal of the local government have checked this disposing of people. Looking at the densely packed seals above, although the local county government felt strange, it was not too conscious. Since it has been able to travel so many places, it must not be the kind of evil person who relies on the immortal arts to make trouble. The group found a place to stay in the city. It is said to be a haunted house where ghosts are often haunted. Yaman's errands are too lazy to take care of it. Even if they don't dare to go to a place at night, they will live in as long as they are willing to live. Inside the house, weeds were overgrown and the windows were leaking. In addition to the stacks of medicine books on the table in the house, there are also piles of bamboo pipes that are cut and grown in different lengths, all with holes. In the small yard, a large water tank was placed, which filled a few fishes caught not long ago and was waiting for the pot. In the small house, the 3 monks, 2 men and 1 woman who were half followers and half Daoists, all walked all the way to pick them up and brought them with them. They are not low-level, 2 golden pills and 1 dragon gate. They originally had a dojo in their hometown of Yongzhou. They didn't dare to say that they occupied one side and acted as prestige. At least there were even a few friends in the court. But this road is not trembling, after all, it is traveling across the state. Especially when I passed through Ruzhou before, I did not go to the Qijing dynasty. I always felt that when I encountered a martial arts style on the road, I would punch to death. This is to blame for the weird person who likes hairpins and give them a fake certificate. In fact, the 3 of them had serious identities earlier and there is no need to change them, but the Qingzero Daoist they have to change to a new one. The reason for their identities is that they disliked their previous names and Dao names and they got too small and the meaning was not good enough. As a gas trainer, the Dao name "How Big a Thing" is the second reincarnation. Therefore, during this journey, the 3 of them wore a false identity and swayed and deceived Daoist Qingling. Can they not panic in their hearts? In their hometown of Yongzhou, they have long heard that there are strangers in a certain county who behave strangely. They wear 3 flowers all the year round without knowing their names and they can compose poems. They are all gods. Sometimes wearing a splendid red shirt, chatting with Zhou Xian official, sometimes in rags, walking in the market and beggars in the street, most like to say some strange things that no one can explain. I want to cover the bird in the bottle with my hands, and I am afraid of the snake in the well on my 4 feet. Toad light dazzled all day long, eyes full of yellow buds revealed. I never thought I met such a guy and turned out to be a grasshopper on a rope. In response to the old saying, getting on a thief ship is easy to get off. There are 3 women in the house who share tribulations and tribulations. There is a woman with a long slender neck, white as snow. A short man in brocade clothes, his body is as long as he is sideways. He comes from Qingchao Lake in Longyang County in Yongzhou, but he is a self-proclaimed romantic. Now his name is Wu Lai, who used to call himself a boy without intestines. The last slender man, named Autumn Night, according to Daoist Qingling, means that the night is dark and the moon is bright, and the quiet man is wearing a little liyue and mingzhong. He got such a brand new Taoist name inexplicably. He was born in a place where wild snakes were produced in ancient Yongzhou, but there were many snake hunters here, so there are very few people who can practice Taoism. Extravagant hope. Among the snake catchers, the most famous in history is of course the woman who entered the Xuandu temple to practice immortality, Wang Sun, with the Taoist name Empty Mountain, and she is one of the 10 people in the world today. It's just that the three of them, one goose, one snake and one crab, still don't know the true identity of that fellow Qingring Daoist. However, they were taught a Taoist book separately, and before the preaching, they were all about the same set of self-boasting and frightening rhetoric. This book will only secretly pass on destined people. Those who dare to divulge my book will be a ghost, a clan and a family according to the law and crime. With a big tone, the three of them each began to practice according to the Taoism, and they seemed to be useless. A long time ago, the Qingling Daoist confidant said that if you only need to persevere in the long run, the emperor will live up to the caring people and you will always get better. These three dumb Taoists who eat Huanglian are currently studying an unknown and heavy book. It is said to be the painstaking work of the old master of Zuanduguan. They are all passed on in this way. It is a pity that Sun Daochong never admits himself. I've written this book. It is really a must-have for mountain and wild repairs to walk the rivers and lakes and seek good fortune and avoid evil. Rumor has it that there is a picture of searching mountains in Hauran, so this book is also called Xianxia. This book is almost at any Xinjia ferry crossing. They are all sold and the price is not expensive, just 2 or 3 snowflakes. The words are concise, the entries are clear, and they are divided into categories. They are all old and respectable golden and good words, and they also introduce the customs of the 14 states in the world. What is the style of those monstrous fairy houses in Taoist temples? Which old are stigmatizing goods for the old and disrespectful? And which little are the upper beams are not straight and the lower beams are crooked, and which things you can stop talking about? If you are reasonable, what are not to provoke, you must hide, you really can't hide, you really have encountered something, you know the identity of the other person, just bow your head and admit your mistakes, don't admit the truth. There are also many short stories similar to ghosts and anecdotes, especially well written, which makes people read with gusto. It is worthy of being Sun Guanzhu, who has made friends all over the world, and he really deserves a compliment of consummate merit. The three geniuses Xianxia Yexia were there to learn from each other, digging out the words. After discussing, if you are lucky enough to meet the old master Sun, who is rumored to be the most amiable to the younger generation on the mountain, what should I say? High morals or high morals. The three fellow Daoists, each holding their own opinions, all have their own reasons. One said that Dao Chong's son was famous and he called it the most suitable name. One said that the old master was a Taoist priest in the end, so he had to have a word for Taoism. Another said that he was old and meant to live a long time, which in itself was the greatest praise. The old Guanzhu did not rush to the door. He stood outside the house, stroking his beard and smiling. He heard good things about him face to face. Most of them were spoofed and slapped, but the praise behind him was mostly out of his sincerity. Yanzhua listened to the debate of the three Daoists outside the door, only to feel that the road under their feet had widened. I just didn't know these three, I really saw the old view masters around me and I couldn't recognize it. It's probably difficult. In the Qingming world, except for a few states, for some reason from the imperial court to the sect, the public use of mirror flowers and water moon in Taoist temples has been forbidden since ancient times. The intestine Sun raised his head suddenly and said in a deep voice, "The Daoist has stopped in broad daylight, how can you break into the house privately? Are you really a vegetarian? Is this really your home?" I saw an old Taoist leader appeared outside the door with a fat young man and 2 brothers, noisily crossing the threshold. Seeing that the old Taoist still crossed the threshold, walked into the house and picked up a handwritten medicine book. The opening content of the preface of that page is very knowledgeable. He claims that nowadays doctors always like to treat diseases with the king's way. I don't know that the royal way is dry and fierce, and if the medication is not careful, it will increase other diseases. Therefore we will treat the royal way purely with hegemony. Harmful. Because he knew the true identity of the person who compiled the book, Sun Daochong didn't think that the other party had confused the word Wangba. Wu Lai, who stopped fruitlessly, couldn't help muttering in a low voice, "Why can't I understand human words?" Yanzhua began to look forward to the scene of this fellow Taoist sweeping the floor in Xiandu Temple. I saw the old Taoist master put down his book and glanced at Wu Lai. He saw that he liked arty with a pile of jade pendants and sachets hanging from his waist. He smiled and joked, "This little brother be a burden. Where's Zhai's stall? Pan Dao will turn around to help you introduce a fellow man. If it is not for going out and there is a book full of good words on the table, otherwise Wu Lai will yell at him and I have to reply, do you want this uncle to send you to see your ancestor? Bamboo can be blown no matter how long or short, but you have to cut your ears according to your material. You guys, he has chosen him as a manufacturable material, luck is not bad." Dao Tongsun picked up a piece of bamboo pipe in his hand, weighed one or two and asked casually, "Where is the hairpin lady who brought you here?" After all, the Dragon Master is a Taoist who has reached the Ascendant Realm twice, and the other party has the intention to hide his traces. It is still a little troublesome to find it. Besides, Sun Huizhong didn't even think about it. The three looked at each other and they were all a little suspicious. Could it be that Qing Ling, who is also a teacher and a friend of Taoism, is actually a female cultivator? If it's a man, it's nothing rough looks. Even if the hairpin on his head, it can still gain a reputation as a stranger, but if it's a woman, ugliness is really ugly. Chunshi asked carefully, "The old Daoist is asking the whereabouts of Daoist Qingling?" Dao Chongsun nodded and said, "I just came to him to reminisce about the past." She looked embarrassed, not only was afraid that the other party was the one who came and the bad one would not come, and the enemy would come to the door, but also that the other party was not looking for the fault. But because she had leaked the trace, she was later taken revenge by the Qingling Daoist and caused her to eat for nothing. Hang down. As a result, she looked at the two Daoists around her from the corner of her eye, and they both pretended to be deaf and dumb, putting on a posture that it didn't matter to her. Chunshi had to bite the bullet and asked, "Old Taoist, since it's a visit, can you report your identity and Taoist name if you are looking for a fellow Qingling Daoist?" The veteran said with a smile, "No." Wu Lai was completely annoyed but still stubbornly muttered in a low voice, "It's so good, so be careful to go out without friends." Dao Chongsun glanced at the window and smiled, "Dogs can't change eating shit, but they always think of a lady knocking on the window, either a fox or a ghost. Thinking with your knees, you know that guy, but whenever you encounter this kind of activity that is very likely to die, behave like a ghost, you must yell, 'Get out of the way and let me come.'" Many elderly cultivators are two people when they are young and old. That Dragon Master, however, is a rare ordinary person, always infatuated, just like pretending to be romantic as if he was afraid that others would think he was infatuated. And this other is actually only one person, the person who is infatuated by the infatuated person. Sun Daochong sighed. Long Xingpu, who is actually pitiful, said, "The poor Wei comes from the Xuandu temple in Qizhou next door." Chunshi was stunned when he heard the words, but the autumn night was skeptical. Only that Wu Lai shouted angrily and complained with the two fellow Taoists, "What are you doing in a daze? Hurry up, let's kowtow to the old gods together." Yanzhua grinned, but he was so exaggerated when he heard about Xiandu Temple. Dao Chongsun waved his hand, "Forget it, you are not Taoist priests in Xuandu Temple and all you meet on the road are Taoists. You kowtow to people casually for no reason in any manner." That autumn night suddenly asked, "This old Taoist chief has ever heard of Hongping Hongxian chief who worked at that motu in the ancestral court of Xuanduguan? I heard that Gao Xing went to a certain national Taoist temple in Qizhou a few years ago to be the first." Sun Daochong smiled and shook his head and said, "Who? I haven't heard of it. Taoism is a bit big. Maybe Pang Dao has never seen this Hong Xianchong who was born in the same line. But Pang Dao can talk to him when he turns around." After arriving in Yongzhou, how did you become acquainted with fellow Taoists? In a Taoist temple there are 18 heads of the 3 capitals, 5 masters, 8 deacons, and these guys are in charge of a large group of Taoists. What's more, the Xuandu temple is second to none in the world, plus the hundreds of large and small Taoist temples outside of the ancestral court. The entire Qizhou area belongs to the Xuandu temple family. It is just an official Taoist with a degree. Nearly 100,000 people. The vast majority of Taoist officials may not have seen the predominant side in their entire lives. What's more, even Xuanduguan's Patriarch's Hall deliberations, the old masters did not participate every time. About 10 meetings 2 or 3 times, that's not bad. Qiu Ye's face changed slightly and she smiled. "Don't take it seriously, the old chieftain, it's made up by me nonsense. There is no such thing as Hong Xiancheng, who was born in the ancient capital of the ancient capital, the Taoist official of the ancient capital. Is it me? A gas trainer of this kind can afford to climb high. Yanzhuo was a little worried about this guy's fate. There is a widely circulated saying in the Qingming world, which is specially used to advise those who like to talk halfway. It is not only circulated among state officials, but even in the cities and towns of that country. It is known to women and children. The person who was half-talking last time has already sprinkled water in the Xiandu temple to sweep the floor. After all, De Xian Duguan's son Daoist, Taoism is high. He is very careful. Anyone who deliberately sold off with this old master of Guanzi dare to talk halfway, and if he is not careful he will get an invitation letter to go to Xuanduguan as a guest. As for the so-called invitation letter, it means the old master slaps you into a faint. When he wakes up he is already lying in an unfamiliar house with buckets, rags, brooms and dustpans on his feet. Dao Chang's son stroked his beard and said with a smile, "When the Taoist official of Xuanduguan is so high and unattainable, why don't you know? It's good to be friends with each other." Pang Dao thinks that in the future, it's more than enough to be a master or protect the country in a small country. Yanzhuo immediately understood that the Hong Xianchong had entered the eyes of the old master. Because the old master said to see him, he would definitely go to see him. Sun Daochong took out the 3 secret seals of Xiandu Temple from his sleeves and placed them on the table gently. Talking to the 3 Taoist friends is a great meeting ceremony, don't dislike it. Chun Shi and that Chia looked at each other, and they were afraid to take the purple golden rune that lingered between sword and Dao Qi. Only Wu Lai, courageous, not afraid of death, cowering, carefully picked up the rune, stamped a gatekeeper and thanked the old Taoist chief. Sun Daochong smiled and said, "You read the book on the table in vain. It's okay today. If you encountered a poor Dao, you must be careful in the future. Don't be so mad about money and be careful." Chun Shi asked suddenly, "Dare to ask the old Taoist chief, why do all the talisman in the world like to be stamped with a real person's seal?" In the Qingming world, the difference between the talisman and the seal is the difference between the cloud and the mud. The latter is rumored to enable the wearer to go up the mountain and into the water without any taboos, to deter the wounded, all evil spirits to stay away, to go up to the heavens and to speak to the gods. Sun Daochong smiled and said, "The truth is very simple. Taoist Fulua likes to pay attention to the fact that all ghosts and gods in the world are served in India, while Fulua is in the hands of the judge. A real person and a non-judge cannot be a talisman. If a judge does not have the seal of a real person, his talisman can be used. Otherwise, the talisman in the world is always not a fake, it is not effective enough. In short, it is not powerful and it does not hurt to hit people. As for other worlds, why, there are big symbols except for the Dragon Tiger Mountain Heavenly Master Mansion, which is unique like that symbol under the mysterious gate. In fact, it is a secret seal from Mr. Sanshan Jiuho in terms of the profound and long-lasting origins of Taoism. In fact, it is not at all inferior to the Green City of the Great Master by Yujing and the Lingbao City of Pangding. Can even be said to be worse. The 3 of them were taken aback when they heard it. Of course, they had heard of the awe-inspiring Longhushan Heavenly Master's Mansion and the Fulu Yushuan. Today did we meet someone who speaks louder than Qingling? Old Taoist Master, you have such a verdant city in Lingbao City, especially when you call the old city master Pang Ding by his name. Are you really afraid of being struck by lightning?" Sun Daochong smiled and said, "Now can I tell Pang Dao, where on earth is your Daoist Qing Zero swaying?" Wu Lai said, "Senior Qingling may be busy fishing at the Jianpu Lake right now. I heard that the sea base over there tastes the best." Dao Chang's son nodded, thanked him, pointed to the book on the table and said, "You don't have to be too serious about reading this kind of book. You can throw it away after reading it." Chun Shi shook his head and said, "Dao Chang's son, this is a good book. In particular, some very short tales of ghosts and monsters with a few hundred words are very interesting." Sun Daochong smiled and said disapprovingly, "That's because you haven't read a really good book. When you read a lot in the future, you will know that your current love is nothing more than a wrong love. It's a waste of time." Wu Lai cautiously reminded, "Old Daoists say this, just relax. I heard that the author of this book, like the old Daoists, they all come from Xianduguan." Dao Chang's son smiled and said, "We turn the book readers and scold the book writer a few words. What's the matter? That's a matter for the face. Don't know what is good or bad. The one who writes short stories the most annoying likes to show off skills and is flashy. Especially for those who write long stories. Don't talk about the footwear, and the chirping is not easy. Go, this is called idleness. To put it awkwardly, it is to use a shit-stirring stick as a chopstick, pour water into the good wine and curse a few words. It is all light. If the poor Tao is uncomfortable reading a certain book, just go and arrest the writer to Xuanduguan, hold a brick and face that guy every day. Let the fellow write well, write carefully all night. Dan wrote. Pang Dao really did this kind of thing. A few times, of course, believe it or not. The ancients have a cloud, and an ancient book has been written and passed down from generation to generation. The author of a new book, the writing is the great cause of the future. What is a really good book? I turned the book and saw the openness. After reading it, I only felt that my mouth was scented, or I wanted to drink a few sips of wine. In the anxious place, I only feel that my heart is nailed, and it is hard to catch my breath after closing the book. Knowing someone or a certain sentence in the book, at first sight they seem to be in the mountain of books, waiting for a long time. I wait for words and words for me. On the edge of Kampu Lake, a man who had been busy at Jiqiandu for a long time and failed to attract customers, returned to the lake with hairpins on his head and continued fishing with a rod. Business is hard to make money, and money is hard to make, and it's really hard to eat a lot of food. The man with the hairpin on his head saw the three people who appeared out of thin air. He immediately stood up and said with a bright smile, Sun Guanzhu, I haven't seen him for many years. I don't know if he is still such a strong body and a fairy style. What kind of state is it? Why don't you speak up and listen and frighten me? Sun Daochang sneered and raised 1 foot. 7 realms. The man glanced at the foot raised by the old Guanzhu and the other foot, and he sighed in his heart. It was really 14th level. Sort of coming. Chapter 960. Qingping Jianzong's Shanshui mansion report is placed on the side of Yunjing Mountain and is temporarily in charge of Zhongqiu. In the future, Jinghua Shuiyue was placed on Sumyo Mountain by Tui Dongshan instead of Zhu Mountain with the best scenery, or Yunjing Mountain, which is the closest to the ferry. Unexpectedly, it is reasonable to say that Xindu Mountain is the place for sword training, and Yunjing Mountain Wufu learns boxing, both of which are pure. Tui Dongshan smiled and said, Teacher, you are the accountant. It's better to look through the account books so that my husband and the ancestors of the Shangzong will have a good idea. Speak up and make everyone happy. Zongmen celebrations are not comparable to the opening ceremonies of ordinary Jindan monks. Those who come to congratulate are often rich and powerful Zongzi head sections. Near the sect of the Mountain Dynasty country, plus the vassal sect of the Immortal Mansion, various landscapes and gods, for the sake of face, almost all gritted their teeth and gave a gift that does not lose their share. This is also the embarrassment of the Lushan Huangliang School and Yunxia Mountain as neighbors on the Aquarius Island. There are so many times to watch the ceremony and they can only go out and not enter, which is equivalent to often actively sending money to Yunxia Mountain, which is shaped like a mountain of a vassal. A grieved, dull face and hurt the wealth of the treasury. Some immortal sects, especially not authentic, will specially arrange for people to roll the name and directly report the content of the gift, a few gods and treasures, and open the skylights to speak up. Directly at the ceremony, it's clear that it's clear, for example. AI Aizhou Pei Daifeng, due to the high ability of the fire dragon real person to accept apprentices, often holds celebrations. It is rumored that every time the celebration ends, the respected fire dragon real person often sends it personally. When the guest came down the mountain, the old real man looked kind, and he had to ask him if he had encountered difficulties at home recently. Zhongqiu smiled and nodded and took out an account book from his sleeve. This time Qingping Jianzong held the sect celebration. Since the first invitation letter was issued, to this day in the most recent period of time, Misiefeng the distinguished guests are like clouds, not counting the father and son of AI Aizhou Lushir and Mr. Yu of the Xianmi dynasty. The three of them are climbing on a temporary visit today. Misiefeng has not arranged a place to live, and the remaining 32 distinguished guests will welcome the expenses of sending away. Adding the tea and melon seeds from the Patriarch Hall today, the total is $726. Fortunately for Huang Ting, she used to be spectators at various ceremonies in Taiping Mountain, which was similar to Tao Jiangxian's previous statement, as long as she sat and dozed off. But Huang Ting, who has a deep blessing fortune, doesn't have to worry about the immortal money anymore. She still knows what the concept of 720 taels of silver is. Yiyun is the leader of Pushan Yunkateng. This Huang Yiyun likes to leave the general affairs to Tan Rong, Shuahuai and the others to take care of them. If they don't deal with it specifically, she still has to look at them and nod their approval. Therefore Yi Yunyun is extremely knowing the expenses of a fairy house sect to hold a ceremony, arrange a place to stay for the guests. The daily hospitality of the fairy house, wine, tea, and the melons and fruits carefully cultivated by the farm monks are a large sum of money every day. The scene is beautiful, and the sect's spiritual energy consumed is a landscape picture that needs to be smashed forcibly with money, plus some monks who can't go to Prashan, so just throw them into an unreachable place with thin aura. Doesn't it delay their cultivation? And this requires Yun Chaotang to crush a large amount of snowflake money in advance, and water aura in advance in various fairy houses and snail shell ashrams to create a seat that is good for cultivation. According to the saying on the mountain, every breath of the monk's breath is money from the gods. It's not a joke. It's all money. In addition, some gifts are needed for the end of the celebration, and the guests can bring down the mountain in return. On the mountain's accountant treasury, go to the local dynasty or other immortal mansions to buy some unique and elegant gifts. A viewing ceremony before and after, the total expenditure added together, is an astronomical amount of fairy money. Once you really want to pay attention to the face of the clan and deduct the gift income, you may even be able to make ends meet. In the end, Qingping Jianzong did well, and it cost more than 700 taels of silver, not even a single snowflake. Qin Pingan's face was sullen, and he still had the 6 silver coins. How did you figure it out, master? This is a bit too much. Wei Wenlong sighed with emotion. It was also Mr. Accountant who learned what he learned, and if the seedling master didn't make a move, he was a blockbuster when he made a move. Born as a national teacher in Nanyuan, who is worthy of the old lotus root flower blessed land, Wei Wenlong sighed that he was not as good as he was careful. Zhongqiu turned over the first page of the account book, and the next is the gift income for this celebration. On the Daquan dynasty side, Li Shiling, the official book of the Ministry of Rites, was better than the old General Yao Zhen and Fu Yin Yao Xianji, and then went to Mishua Peak. In addition to the 80 rain money he carried with him, Daquan Emperor Yao Jinji also took the initiative to make a promise with Qingping Jianzong. In the future, the Daquan dynasty will find a sword-repairing embryo in the borders and vassal countries in the future. It will immediately be sent to Xindu Mountain to practice sword training, and the money needed for sword refining will be paid by the Daquan Household Department. If Xindu Mountain is here, Bian is willing to collect Jianxiu as the direct disciples of Zhufeng. Of course, it is best. If it feels inappropriate, let them go back to the mansion and return to Daquan. However, His Majesty Daquan made one and only request, which is to call Xindu Mountain. Swordsman who was born in the future must go down the mountain to serve as the royal consecration of the Daquan dynasty, or the monk of the frontier army, for a period of at least 1 jiazi time. As the younger brother of Emperor Daquan, Yao Xianji, who is still serving as the Mirage City Mansion Yin, is actually the first time he knew about this. He finally understood a little bit why he would have a chair in Qingping Peak's Ancestor Hall. In addition to his personal friendship with Mr. Qin in the future, these sword repairmen from the Daquan dynasty will gradually enter Qingping sword sect. Then he is their patrons? Qin Pingan laughed and joked, "You kid, is too late to regret it now. Qingping Jianzong and Daquan dynasty are allies. There will be a seat for you in the Patriarch's Hall. If you change your seat, you will be sitting. So if you feel troublesome, thin-skinned, and worry that you are not qualified for this position, I can help discuss with Cui Dongshan. Wait a few years and then let your emperor recommend others. If it is not too troublesome, you can sit openly. Anyway, I'm just the mountain lord of Luopa Mountain, and not the lord of Qingping sword sect. If I encounter a dispute in the future, you can quarrel as much as you want. I don't need to quarrel with the Lord Cui. I can at least guarantee one thing. You will be here in the future. No matter who you are with, no matter how fierce the quarrel is, you don't have to worry about turning your face. There will be no less trivial matters in the future, but there will be no worries." Yao Xianji gathered the sound together and joked, "Mr. Qin, I have changed people and come to sit in my seat. How can they dare to make trouble sitting here? They will definitely not dare to take a breath, let alone fight with reason. It is estimated that occasionally we will come here to participate in discussions on behalf of our Daquan, and I am destined to sit here as a wooden person. It is not what Sect Master Cui said. This is not good. It is absolutely impossible. Besides, I am also familiar with Miss Pei, just like Mr. Qin, that said, no matter how fierce the noise is when the door is closed, when the door is opened, it is still my own family." Yao Xianji glanced at the only hanging statue in Zhu Shirtang. "Who dares to make trouble here? Sect Master Cui Dongshan was an immortal. Before that battle, the old Master Sun Yuan of Yugozong was known as the Fairyland. What's more, the current chief worshipper Miyu is still a Fairyland sword repairman, and even more so the Miyu from the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Moreover, Mr. Qin has already made his meaning very clear. He is the grandfather of the Supreme Master or Mr. Sius Gentleman, coupled with the incense between Mr. Qin and Daquan, many times without Mr. Qin speaking, he is a kind of respect to the Daquan dynasty. Invisible favoritism. Zhongqiu continued, Pushun Tanzhong Lu, this time to congratulate the mountain 2 land deeds were sent. They are 2 enclaves far from Pushun and the nearest to Xindu Mountain. According to the most conservative valuation they are worth at least 5,600 Guyuqian can be used as the opening of the Golden Core Monk's dojo. As for whether it can be opened into 2 smaller Xianxia ferry crossings, more detailed investigation is needed for the time being. Yi Yunyun smiled and said, Tan Rong has discussed this with me in advance. According to my personal opinion, it is actually enough to take out a land deed, but Tan Rong and Xue Huai feel that it is not appropriate. They used a good deed. The reason for this, I wanted to say something at the time. Tan Rong started to threaten me with a posture of Sandlord. If you talk nonsense, I will resign from the law. Nothing, let him go. Anyway, Pushun makes money. I have always relied on them for money. They don't feel distressed and it's not my turn to dictate. Jiaxing sighed. Before the poor road, I didn't dare to say anything. I was worried that I was a frog at the bottom of the well. I didn't know much about it. Hearing the sincere words of the Lord Yishan, I can finally be absolutely sure. It is natural to be close to Qingping Jianzong, so the alliance between our 2 parties is really a natural fit. If the good words stopped here, it would not be the old fairy Jia who immediately went to teach in a private college. Pandao can't speak, he wants to speak, he's also going straight back and forth. He doesn't know much about Pushun Yunkatang before. I only think that it is Yi Shanju, the pillar of pillars, who provoked it alone. All the heavy burdens I only know now. It turns out that there are many responsible people on Pushun's side, no shortage of heroes, nonsense, many offenses, and I hope that Lord Yishan will forgive him. There was silence in the chamber. It seems that when the old fairy Jia speaks, he has a unique aura. Yunyun had to clasp her fists and smiled and said, thanks to the prize. Zhongqiu turned a page and said with a smile, on Yuguazong's side, the gift is 800 Guyuqian. Qin Pingon couldn't help asking, how much? Guyuqian, 800 pieces. Zhongqiu said, besides, young Master Jiang Heng promised something orally at Yunku Fudi, but there is no paper contract. They will have Huanggeji and Yenshan within 500 years. All the income from the office is given to Qingping Jianzong. As a congratulatory gift from Jiang's blessed land, it has nothing to do with Yuguazong. According to young Master Jiang, this is the Jiang's ancestral hall before his father went down the mountain for a tour. No one has any objections to this resolution. Xiaomo is a little bit ashamed of himself. The chief of the fallen mountain Zhou, who only heard his name but never met him, is really magnificent. The old real person Liang Shuang refers to Xianfeng Yuan Lingdian Taihui Jianzong Lu Jinglong, and Jinjai is a great sword fairy Su Hao. They all have a few grains of rain and money. In fact, this is the common sense for watching rituals on the mountain. Among them, Taishishan the Immortal was really very polite and took out 2 private treasures as gifts, one for Taishishan and one for his personal congratulations. Cui Dongshan chuckled and said, it's a pity that our Wei Haoyang is not on the mountain. Otherwise Sect Master Lu can hardly be called invincible. Pei Qian didn't speak. She knew how Wei Haoyang got the nickname. Among the 4 people in Uafudi scrolls, the one that Pei Qian is closest to, except for Zhu Lian, is Wei Xian, who proclaims that he has a very good drinker and then pours a cup. This was because Pei Qian spent a long time getting along with the old cook when he arrived at Luapa Mountain. I really want to say that the relationship at the beginning was that the little black charcoal girl was still the best with Wei Xian. Moreover, I left the lotus roots and traveled to Tongyi's house together. I also counted that Wei Xian took Pei Qian to go out and wandered the most times. I dare not say that he returned with a full load. After all, Wei Xian was also poor at that time and had little money in his pocket, but make sure that the little girl eats her belly round and hiccups all the way. So now I look at Wei Xian's direct disciple, the little girl Chai Wu, and Pei Qian have a different mentality. In fact, the Xinjia wine and water that Chai Wu is drinking now is all Pei Qian's own money. Then there is Qiu Du, because the old woman was a guest of ceremonies first, and then became an enshrined by the Zushitang. she sneaked a trip to the old Dragon Palace site before, but under the eyes of the new king of the East Sea, Zhou, trembling, walking on thin ice, took out a small part. The old Dragon Palace treasures, except for the 3 favorite objects at the bottom of the box, will be used by the old Dragon Palace teacher as a dowry for the future, and all the others will be taken out. Qiudu didn't even leave one for himself. After Cui Dongshan's previous help, he estimated 600 grains of rain money. At the same time, it can be seen that the wealth of the family and financial resources of a Dad Yulong Palace in the past years. Qingtong also took the initiative to find Cui Dongshan before, along with a nearby object, mostly a single collection of books and some secret treasures. If you leave out a few treasures on the mountain, it is probably equivalent to 1/10 of a treasure in the old Jingyao building. Therefore, according to Cui Dongshan's statement at the moment of planting autumn, he directly reported a number. The congratulatory gift of young fellow Daoists was 1,200 gu yuqian. Cui Dongshan said suddenly, "Mr. Eugene over there, he claims to be willing to take out 50% of his family as a gift. This is because Zhong Kue previously helped to mediate. It is equivalent to helping Fat Gusu come to collect debts. Otherwise, Cui Dongshan and Xiao Imo will only resolutely deny that there has been such a thing, and the other will only say that they did not make it." Across the sea, Qin Pingon smiled and said, "You are the next sect master. This kind of next sect affairs ask me what to do. If you really want me to say something, 50% is too much, 30% or 4% is enough." Cui Dongshan said, "Understood." Finally, there are the 2 rich landlords, Lu Jubao and Yu Panshui. They are not disappointing at all. They can be called extraordinary shots. One given is a large fairy named Tongyin. Although it is regarded as Liuzhou Lu, the common gift of the clan and the Xuanmi dynasty, the Tongyin fairy is not a high-cost and sky-high intercontinental fairy like Fengyuan, but the rank is no less than that of Luopa Mountain, so the route can be included. Tonggishao is a land of mountains and rivers, and its carrying capacity is better than the dragon boat that was used as a viewing boat in the past. For Qingping Jianzong, this is equivalent to a good thing for someone to doze off and hand over a pillow. After all, today's in the vast world, the ferry boats of high rank are too short of demand and money can't be bought. As long as there is this kind of ferry, you will have a cornucopia of wealth. Cui Dongshan glanced at Pei Qian and said cautiously, "Except for this Dongyin ferry, Lu Jubao and Yu Panshui all hope that the master sister can serve as the famous guest of the Lu family and the Xuanmi dynasty of Aizhou, and the master sister is willing to be the offering is better. As long as the elder sister nods, the 2 parties are willing to give 600 gu yuqian and 400 gu yuqian in one breath. If it is the offering, the amount of gu yuqian will be doubled, and they both promised just under the name. For the named guest qing or enshrinement, there will be no need for the master sister to participate in any family ancestral halls or the Xuanmi dynasty's capital meetings in the future. The master sisters will show up on the Aizhou or Xuanmi dynasty at least every 100 years. Qin Pingon was speechless. The Lu family is really wealthy to the point of heinous. Don't guess, the Tongyin ferry is Liu's family property, and it has no relationship with Yu Panshui. Maybe even the 1,000 gu yu money that invited Pei Qian to serve as the honorable guest was Lu Jubao's pocket alone. So it is different to have a rich friend who is the richest in the world. Qin Pingon wanted to ask those 2 privately, "Can you still accept martial arts?" To say that Lu Jubao and Yu Panshui, as extremely pragmatic businessmen, of course, do not have money and no place to spend, they have a certain degree of selfishness. The relationship between the sword fairy Su Hao and Pei Qian is so good, which is a clear proof. Back in Jinjiazhu, Zhou Xian rescued many mountain trainers and dynasty generals on the battlefield. This taciturn woman martial artist was young and punched and ruthless. Although she was not as great as Chao Xi, she didn't know why. All the natives of Jinjiazhu have discovered a strange thing. It seems that Zhou Xian, who has the unshakable hatred with the wild monster race, has fought against the enemy on the battlefield from south to north. Ruthless, more brutal than Chao Xi and Yi Yufu, who are also pure martial artists. In many cases, Zhou Xian simply deliberately tortured and killed the monk, or deliberately smashed half of the head of a demon cultivator, especially a few demon cultivators who were tortured by Zhou Xian, specially freed his hands. There was once a rumor that he had been to half of the Great Wall of Sword Qi to make swords. The young Xianxia was unfortunately found by Zhou Xian, and he was pulled up by Pei Qian. At that time, a monk of the Yuanying monster tribe who was a protector of Taoism, was opened with the palm of his hand and carried a magic trick. Instead of retreating, she cut the opponent in half on the spot, and the female grandmaster, who was already covered in blood, just passed by. On the battlefield of Jinjiazu, from the genealogical monk to the army under the mountain, everyone has hatred and they all bear blood, and there is no retreat, so everyone is avenging. However, Jing Qian's help to avenge his revenge is undoubtedly the most enjoyable in the eyes of the Jinjiazu natives on the battlefield. But in fact, the reason why Pei Qian, a martial artist from a foreign country, made such a fist in Jinjiazhou so fierce and almost abnormal, is purely a kind of silent venting of anger. It is you wild beasts that prevented my master from returning home. According to Cui Dongshan's humorous saying, every time Jinjiazhou mentioned Mr., it would be a sentence, oh, it turned out to be the master of Master Zheng. Therefore, it is hard to say that the husband and the master sister go to other places together, but in that Jinjiazu, the master sister must be more popular. In short, when the Lu family of Iazhao did business in Jinjiazu in the future, Pei Qian made an exception to serve as the honor of a certain mountain for the first time, Kiching, which is a very powerful gold signboard. Pei Qian said, yes, it's okay to be an offering. But Gu Yuqian, Qingping Jianzong and Luopashan are half divided. In fact, the sword fairy Su Hao had mentioned this to her before, but she did not directly agree or refuse, only to ask the master. Cui Dongshan was about to peck the rice, but Qin Pingon shook his head and said, you keep this fairy money for yourself. Pei Qiangyan smiled and said, Master, I'm a martial artist, what do I keep so much fairy money? Qin Pingon smiled and said, Master has the final say. Pei Qian said, listen to the master. When the ferry was built earlier, Cui Dongshan once asked Pei Qian a question while his husband was away. When the elder sister was in Jinjiazu, didn't she plan to return to Luopa Mountain? Pei Qian was silent for a long time, just drinking. Cui Dongshan insisted on the master sister to give an answer, and then Pei Qian gave the true thoughts in his heart. As long as master does not return to Luopa Mountain will not be her home. What she meant was that if the master is gone, her home will be gone. It's just that Cui Dongshan has not dared to tell her husband so far. I'm afraid of being held hostage by the master sister, and even more afraid that my husband will be sad. Cui Dongshan patted his palms. There will be a second ceremony next, let's rest for half an hour. Because there is also a writing ceremony for the Qingping Jianzong Jinyu genealogy. Qin Pingon and Li Baoping walked out of the main hall, but did not go straight to the square outside the entrance of the Patriarch Hall. They sat on the steps outside the door. Cui Dongshan took Pei Qian to find the two rich men. Chao Qingqing, Xiao Mili, and of course the old Jia, are busy in the ancestor hall and need to rearrange their chairs. There will be a table with pens, inks, papers, and ink stones. The earliest writer will write down Cui Dongshan, the first lord of Qingping Jianzong, his name, birthplace, and pedigree, the first in the genealogy of Qingping Feng's Patriarch Hall. Page. Of course this person is Qin Pingon. Then it was the long life of the ancestor of the Shangzong Zanglu, to write the name on the genealogy for the next Zongzanglu Tsui. After this, it was Cui Wei who took the seat and was responsible for writing the names of all the genealogical monks included in the Qingping sword sect, Miyu Zhongqiu Chao Qingqing. After that was the apprenticeship ceremony. Cui Dongshan took Hu Chuling and Jiang as his disciples. Cui Wei, take his disciple back in an oblique manner. Miyu took He Gu as a direct biography and Sui right to accept Qing Chaolu and so on. After they drank the apprentice tea, the disciples bowed their heads, even if they were official apprentices on the mountain. Among the second-generation disciples of the Xiangshan Xiazong, as the direct disciples of the mountain lord Qin Pingon, there are Cui Dongshan, Pei Qian, Chao Sunny, Zhao Xuxiao, and Guizhujiu. The Tsin Yuanji that Zhu Lian brought up the mountain, the two disciples of Lu Baixiang, Yuan Bao, Yuan Lai. Wei Xian's disciple Chai Wu. The two disciples of Jia Xing, Zhao Denggao, and Tianjie. Then there are 6 sword fairy embryos including Bai Xian except King Sun Chun, who is an anonymous disciple of Ning Yao. And the 3 generations of disciples, the eldest disciple with Pei Qian, the little mute of the Kalongxiang New Year shop, his real name is Zhou Junqian. And Jiang Chu Hu Chuling, who will soon become Cui Dongshan's direct disciples, thank you, a few of them. According to the seniority of the mountain, when you see Qin Pingon in the future, these few will be honored as ancestors. Qin Pingon smiled and asked, why happen to be here today? Li Baoping said, I traveled to the gate of Sui Mountain in Zhongtu and I finished the draft early. When I went up the mountain, I had to discuss with the Department of Etiquette of the Shanjun Mansion to see if I could be allowed to build the monument. It turned out to be such a coincidence. I was still wondering how I was on the border of Suishan Mountain. I heard a sound of drums in the middle of the night. When I hurried to the foot of the mountain, it was just daybreak when Zhou Xian appeared in person. In addition to saying that there was no problem with the Tubei issue, he also told me the reason for the drum sound, saying that the young master left the solar term courtyard in Suishan last night. If I entered the Zhongyue realm earlier last night, he could help with the little master. I estimated the time and it seemed that there was less than a stick of incense. If I was anxious, I called my brother. When I was involved, my brother and Zhou Xian made apologies and apologized. After that, my brother did not. I immediately let it go, and helped to figure out the specific time of the celebration on the little teacher's side, so I had to be patient and accompany my brother to build the monument. Qin Pingon smiled and said, confused, who is it that accompanies whom to rub the monument? Li Baoping laughed. Qin Pingon said, blame me for leaving too hastily. Li Baoping said, my brother said that he should not show up here temporarily. He is going to take a trip to the Western Buddhist country first. After he comes back, he may first go to Baidi City as a guest, and then come to the little uncle for a refreshing drink. Qin Pingon nodded. Just hope one thing, in that Baidi City the two sides just play chess, don't fight. After all, I really have to care about it. I can't escape the relationship. Looking at the slightly frowning Uncle Li, Li Baoping suddenly laughed and said, my brother said he will go to Baidi City in the future and it has nothing to do with the little uncle, so don't think about it. Qin Pingon was silent for a moment with his arms folded and said softly, there will always be some people who will make us want to be that kind of person. Li Baoping said, little master has always been such a person. Qin Pingon took out the sword gourd and shook it, don't drink much. Li Baoping took off the sword gourd and gently touched the wine gourd of the little uncle and each drank. Qin Pingon asked with a smile, if you want to travel to Tongyi's house, I can accompany you. Li Baoping blinked. My brother said before he returns, you can't disturb the practice of the younger teacher and uncle. When he said this, my brother looked serious and fierce. Qin Pingon held back a smile. Where can the fierce go? Li Baoping scowled and began to imitate the expression of his elder brother Li Shixing. Aquarius, you really have to listen to this matter once. Don't glance around, don't speak, right? Then you have to nod your head. It's your default. Pei Qian and Cui Dongshan quickly walked into the gate and sat on the steps together. Cui Dongshan sat beside her husband and Pei Qian sat beside Sister Aquarius. Li Baoping touched Pei Qian's head and said something to grow up. Well, the girl is so kind and she is worried about marrying. Pei Qian squinted and smiled, so don't marry someone. Qin Pingon asked, after the second ceremony, can I use a compromise method to bring Yu Guizhong in to participate in the blasphemy? Take it as a common test to decide whether the two sides form an alliance. But we really want to do this. Will Yu Guizhong feel that we are making progress? I'm actually not very good at dealing with this kind of interest exchanges between big sects. Dongshan, do you think it is appropriate? Cui Dongshan smiled and said, sir, there is something you may have misjudged a little bit. Qin Pingon asked, how do you tell? Cui Dongshan said, in this Tongyi's Hao we have nothing to be arrogant. There are actually only two mountain forces that can speak for themselves. It is not our Qingping Jianzong who needs to look at people's faces to act, but they Yu Guizhong. If the other party thinks that we just didn't agree to the alliance right away, they feel that we are aggressive and deliberately put on airs or something, then they really think that Yu Guizhong looks at himself too highly and underestimates our Qingping Jianzong. I think this proposal by Mr. is actually very well measured. A few Zhang Fenggu who can participate in discussions in our Qingping Feng Patriarch Hall as an outsider, should be content. How can it be said to make things difficult for them? Obviously it is a kind of it gives them a big step forward. So Mr. is still too good to talk. Qin Pingon smiled and said, this statement is very good. If you put it another way, Cui Yang is actually very useful. There is nothing wrong with it. I had already reminded the guests to wake up before, so everyone soon gathered again on Qingping Feng Square. Tao Ran came to me side and there was the named worship from the Shangzong, the Taoist name Shizhu. The name is strange, yellow hat and blue shoes, holding a green bamboo stick, accompanied by the chief rice. Both sides leaned against the cliffside railings. Gossip. Miyu straightened up and said with a smile, Tao Jianxian, what's the matter with me? I don't know what to order. Earlier, the hidden officer and Tao Ran came together to participate in the celebration. During the conversation on the mountain road, Miyu almost didn't kneel down for the powerful Tao Jianxian. With a stern look, I advise Master Hermit, don't take a bite of Tao Jianxian from now on, he doesn't like to listen. Before putting it away, I just asked him about the sword. Tao Jianxian, you really don't know the fate of being asked about the sword by our hidden officer. However, Miyu expressed a kind of respect for Tao Ran. In our next sect there are people who are so hard-hearted. Who are there? It seems not. Tao Ran asked, let me dare to ask, fellow Daoist Shizhu is also a sword repairman? Xiao Emo nodded with a smile. Tao Ran bit his scalp and said, there were some idiots before, even if fellow Daoist Shizhu has heard it, don't worry about it. Once in the shop on the Rin River, Tao Ran made a ruthless word with this fellow Taoist. Climb away. Tao Ran is not a fool, just look at the seat arrangement of the Patriarch Hall today, the chair of Daoist Shizhu, but it is right next to Pei Qian. Xiao Emo smiled kindly, shook his head and said, Tao Zhufeng has been worried, so I will call me Xiaoma from now on. Xiao Emo can't remember some of the so-called things Tao Zhufeng said, so why not care about it? Tao Ran was relieved and he did not rashly ask about the other side's realm, so he was easily taboo. What's more, the two sides didn't have much friendship. It really counted and only met for the second time. It was not related to the level of the realm. Xiao Emo seemed to see through Tao Ran's mind and smiled. I and Chief Mi are in a different state. Tao Ran nodded. Yuan Ying realm sword repair? It is estimated that it is not enough. This senior Shizhu is estimated to be a sword immortal in the Yupu realm. Miyu grinned and didn't explain anything. In fact, Tao Ran had already accepted his fate. If you are willing to call Tao Jianxian, if you don't feel the price drop, I don't care. I never thought that Xiao Emo changed his words first, calling himself Taoism and then looking at the chief of me. Xiao Emo deserves to be from the Shangzong Luopa mountain, and he speaks more carefully. Elsewhere, Liang Shuang and Qing were standing together, and the old man asked curiously, my fellow Daoist Qing, why have you also become an offering here? Qing Tong explained with a smile. My name is Qing Tong and Qingping Jianzong has the word Qing and I agree with him. The old real man was speechless for a moment. It's really ridiculous. Not only did Lu Yuzhou see Pei Qian just now, she actually agreed to her father's invitation to serve as her own worship, and she was still happy now. Yu Panshui patted the young man on the shoulder. When do you have a wedding drink? Lu Yuzhou flushed and pretended to be stupid. What do you mean? Lu Jubao smiled and didn't say anything. If it can happen, of course it would be a great happy event. He and Lu Yu's mother had already talked about it in private. She looked forward to it and was sad and asked Lu Jubao herself, is the son a bit unworthy of that girl, but he really wants to marry in. Pei Qian is a limitless martial artist. In case of a quarrel, will his son have a blue nose and swollen face and dare not complain to his parents, and even worry about his wife's slap? Does it hurt? How dare Lu Jubao comment on this incident? I have to admit that his son wants to marry Pei Qian as his wife. This matter is too difficult. The silly son may not have noticed it yet. As Pei Qian's master, the young hidden official looked at his son like an anti-thief. Not only that, Qin Pingon also felt like he was looking for a place to put his sack on. Li Baoping pulled Pei Qian and found Jing Yugon, the eldest disciple of Uncle Lu Shirley. The three of them happened to be the three redisciples of Jun Qian, Qi Jingchun and Qin Pingon from the line of Wenxing. Jiang Chu never thought that he could become Cui Dongshan's direct disciple. The big disciple of Kaishan, it is estimated that there are already candidates, but sect master Cui deliberately omitted to mention it. But Jiang Qun'er dared to hope to become a great apprentice of the lord of the sect. Jiang went and took a deep breath. Zhang Zhezhen just stood there, clasped his fists and shook a few times. The accountant, who looked at least 10 years older than Jiang Chu, smiled sincerely and was sincerely happy for his peers from the same country, but he didn't say anything polite as the icing on the cake. Jiang Chu hesitated to speak but stopped. On the Luopa mountain, Jiang Chu, who devoted himself to the practice of Fulu, was once drawn by Zhu Lian to work on the civil construction work. In fact, Zhu Lian beat Jiang Chu. If you really have a good relationship with Zhang Zhezhen, you will be considered as a small-hearted person, and then I will help you find a preacher. In addition, the old cook also frankly met with Jiang Chu. Be careful, don't be the first mountain monk to be removed from the Luopa mountain. My so-called delisting is not necessarily on the patriarch Hall's genealogy but here. The old cook took the wine jug and tapped his heart lightly. I would like to remind you in advance that this kind of thing is not easy to do. I advise you not to be smart and pretend to be polite with Zhang Jiazhen. Does it work? That would be stupid. You might as well think about it for yourself. We Luopashan, most people look at your Jiang's little thoughts. Isn't it the same as playing? It is as shallow as a small water beach after rain. Jiang Chu did not hold back, reached out his hand to grasp Zhang Jiazhen's arm and said, Jiazhen, don't get old too fast. Although Zhang Jiazhen felt strange, she nodded and smiled. Okay. I just feel that Jiang Chu has become different, like returning to his hometown. Both of them are just day laborers in the wine shop. Bai Xian, Chai Wu and Sun Chun Wang waited for the millet grains. They are all friends on this small hill. It's about the same size now. After finishing the moving of the ancestor's chair, the little girl in black rushed out. Chai Wu asked the question she was most interested in. Guardian, right, you are discussing matters in the Patriarch Hall. Can you drink? If possible, she will practice more seriously. How could the wine over there be the kind of expensive Xianxia fermented wine? Millet scratched his face. This question is a bit tricky and said tentatively, it's okay. The good mountain lord didn't say no, but he just hadn't seen anyone drink it before. Even if it was a good man mountain master and a martial arts leader, such a big official, just now they just drank on the outer steps. Bai Xian's arms crossed his chest. For this kind of question, directly ask the hidden officer. Chai Wu said, how busy Chen Shanju is, can he just see and disturb him? It is rare for King Sun Chun to speak. His lord hidden is busy and patience is still very good. Back then I left with Master Hermit from Luhua Island, and took a talisman boat to swim far away. In order to take care of them, these big kids, big and small things, the Master Hermit was busy alone and I didn't see him complaining. I am very patient. It was later that Chung Chaolu began to share part of it. Later the relationship became familiar except for Yu Qingzhang and He Xiangting, who had prejudices against the hermit. The white-eyed wolf, of course, was the nickname given by Bai Xian. Sun Chun Wang felt they didn't wrong them either, not to mention their nicknames. Compared to his own dead fish eyes, King Sun Chun didn't think it was too ugly. Not far away stood a shy outsider who wanted to get close, Qiuji. Because I saw Qingping peek all over, there were only people of the same age and they were still standing together, so Qiuji wanted to chat with them. After all, Qiuji was still a child. Before he was taken up the mountain, he was not a rich and noble family. He could only be regarded as a substantial gateway to the foot of the mountain, belonging to the scholarly family of the family heir to farming and studying in Tonggishao. After Bai Xian held his hands down, he circled him. Your name is Qiuji? I heard that you are from Yuguazang Jiaifeng? Qiuji nodded. A little nervous. I heard Grandpa Zhang said in private that the children on the side of Luopa Mountain might come from the Great Wall of Sword Qi. In the vast world, it is not the sword repair but the sword repair. Facing the Great Wall of Sword Qi, except perhaps Beiju Luzhou, there will be an extremely complicated mentality. Although Qiuji was not very young, during the short years of Jiu Yifeng's practice, he had gradually realized the weight of these words. Yu Guizong, Jiu Yifeng and Jian Xiu. Bai Xian asked, then have you heard of me? Qiuji nodded and said, it's called Bai Xian. The memory is deep, except that the other party is the same age as him, and not only this Bai Xian but also the others. There is something that Qiuji feels unclear. Especially this Bai Xian was the clearest. Qiuji is still unclear. That is a kind of almost arrogant self-confidence. There are two types of sword repairs in the world, the Great Wall of Sword Qi and beyond. I come from Jianqi Great Wall. In the streets and alleys of my hometown, swordsmen can be seen everywhere. I am young and have never been to Qingtu, but I will definitely go there in the future. Because about every 100 years, there will be a big battle waiting for us to fight, ascend to the top of the city, and then we can hand the sword with the entire wild world. Then Jian Xiu, who grew up in such a place, would still carry a kind of natural edge even if he reached Howren world. Qiuji asked curiously, Bai Xian, can you ask, are you a direct disciple of Lord Hermit? Bai Xian waved his hand. I have a master in my hometown, not to mention that I have a nickname, Little Hermit, and it is not appropriate to go with the master of Hermit. Qiuji wondered. So who is the little hidden official? Bai Xian yawned. Just a few years older than me, that fellow is not worth mentioning. Xiao Mili said immediately, the little hidden official Qin Li is in the Golden Core realm. Bai Xian said, yes, that's why I said it's not worth mentioning. Qiuji was amazed. Awesome, the Golden Core realm is nothing. In the future I will come to Qingping Jianzong often as a guest. Bai Xian asked casually, Qiuji, what realm are you in? Qiuji hesitated but told the truth, Dragon Gate realm. Bai Xian was not surprised but pitying in his eyes. The little sword immortal of the cave mansion realm sighed, shook his head, patted Qiuji on the shoulder and comforted, then it is the same way as Qinli to practice swordsmanship. Am not qualified enough, come here with diligence. I will return to Jiu Yifeng in the future. Remember not to slacken in my practice. Give me a mailing address. Every 3 and 5 points Feijian will send a letter. I have to remind you a few words. Qiuji laughed and nodded gently. It is indeed the Qingping sword sect created by the hidden officer, and it is really not a big deal to be a sword repair in the Golden Core realm. But Qiuji thinks that is reasonable, and that is how it should be. Bai Xian remembered something, looked around, then stretched out his arm around Qiuji's shoulders, involuntarily pulled the ladder to go elsewhere, walked a long distance, deliberately turned his back to the millet. Bai Xian carefully took out a portable book from his arms, the collection of heroes, lowered his voice and said, Qiuji, I met you right away and fell in love with you. Since today is the celebration of our next sect, it must be a lucky day. I have this booklet here. Come and sign it. Name, in the future we will be the kind of friends who cut chicken heads, burned yellow paper and made a knot of golden orchids. Oh, forget that I didn't bring pen and ink, it's okay, I have ink pad and handprints, the same is true. Bai Shou looked at the scene from a distance with a lot of emotion, committing evil. Wang Ji smiled and said, in Yuguazong from Shenxufeng to Jiaifeng, Qiuji would not have such a dialogue. This child is all relaxed at the moment. Zhang Fenggu smiled and said, it's pretty good. The kid will not take the identity of the peak master of Jiuifeng too seriously. If Qiuji can have several peers here, he can become a future generation. Long-term friends, then Jiuifeng will make a profit on this trip. Wang Ji frowned slightly. Would you like to remind Qiuji, don't just put fingerprints on it? There are so many weird skills on the mountain, no wonder Wang Ji is suspicious, and Wang Ji himself in the arena is also extremely heroic, but Qiuji, this child, is extremely important to Yuguizong, so that the Lord Wei Ying went to Haoran. Before the world, words like last words were actually left and they were recorded in the Patriarch Hall. If he himself cannot return from the barren world, he will be enshrined by Zhang Fenggu and Wang Ji, the Patriarch Hall, and protect Qiuji at any cost. As for the position of Sect Master Yugui, I would rather hang it for 100 years or even longer, and let Qiuji grow slowly and then fill the position of the next sect master. Zhang Fenggu thought for a moment. We don't need to be so nervous. The spirit of Qingping Jianzong is still trustworthy. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if the Yuguizong and Qingping Jianzong return to the future without success this time, it is still a fair and upright battle between gentlemen. Zhang Fenggu believed in the local sword repair of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and trusted a last-generation hermit who was willing to guard the city. Wang Ji laughed at himself. It's me who treats a gentleman's belly with a villain's heart. Zhang Fenggu smiled and said, you can't say that, don't think so. Zhang Fenggu hesitated for a moment and said tentatively, Wang Zhuanfeng, can you curse Jiang Shangzhen less in the future when discussing matters in the ancestor hall of Shenzhenfeng? Hearing this thoughtless reminder, Wang Ji didn't know how to answer for a while. As the ancestor of Yuguizong, the old master Sun Yuan, Zhang Fenggu knows more inside stories than Wang Ji. Many years ago, Wei Ying, the sword repairman who was still the peak master of Jiuifeng, had found the old Lord Sun Yuan and suggested that Yuguizong lead him, gather a group of Tonghis sword repairs, learn from Beiju Luzhou and rush to the sword. In the Great Wall of Qi for a long time swallows held like mud, using one of the most stupid methods, and finally won a considerable amount of kendo luck for the entire Tonghis Hao. And as the leader of Yuguizong, maybe there is a chance for an ascended realm. Jianxiu. At that time, Zhang Fenggu, who was Sun Yuan's junior brother, happened to be there, but Sun Yuan didn't agree and didn't give a statement. He only said that the matter would be discussed again. In fact, the so-called reconsideration meant that Sun Yuan would not mention it again. This makes Wei Ying extremely puzzling. There is no resentment, but loss is always inevitable. When Zhang Fenggu also went to inquire privately, senior brother Sun Yuan still did not give a reason. In the end, the facts proved that Sun Yuan and Wei Ying were both right and wrong at the same time. For the entire Tonghis Hao, Wei Ying was wrong with Sun Yuan, but for Yuguizong it was Wei Ying who was wrong with Sun Yuan. Because once Yuguizong is too deeply involved with the Great Wall of Sword Qi and behaves too much, The encirclement of the monster army may at least have one more old throne monster such as Fei Fei or Move the Mountain. The old ancestor Yuan show even added a Qiyun, the savage Jiazi account, may be directly regardless of the cost, even if the pace of the attack on Aquarius is delayed. The peaks of Yuguazong must be flattened as a kind of this is the end of the method of killing chickens and cursing monkeys, showing a gesture with Haoran, and daring to join the Great Wall of Jianqi. However, Zhang Fenggu confirmed that it was from that day that the senior brother Sun Yuan recognized Wei Ying and began to really plan for Wei Ying's future suzerain, paving the way for him in secret. In a sense, even to break the tradition, let Jiang Shangzhen, who was not the peak master of Juifeng, serve as the next master of Yuguizong, and let Wei Ying go to Beipingzu to succeed the master of the real world. It means that the two sides have switched positions. Sun Yuan clearly prepared for the worst. Let Jiang Shangzhen guard the Zushan Shen's Hufeng, and die if he died, and let Wei Ying and Zhenjingzong inherit the incense of Yuguizong. Go down. That is to say, from the very beginning, Sun Yuan first regarded Jiang Shangzhen as a roadblock for Wei Ying as the suzerain, and then placed it on Aquarius Island similar to a feudal vassal, but when the battle was about to come he turned his head like again. Let His Royal Highness stay away from the capital, away from the place where the situation is precarious and there is no way out of right and wrong, and let the prince of the vassal enter the capital. Is Jiang Shangzhen really aware of the plan of the old master Sun Yuan? Must be very clear. No. Well. Are there any complaints? No complaints. Therefore Zhang Fenggu looked at Jiang Shangzhen with an extremely complicated mentality. Because even Yu Quzong himself, most of the monks who have chairs in the Patriarch Hall, still haven't realized this. It seemed that Jiang Shangzhen didn't want anyone to realize the truth at all, so he was happy to continue to be scolded. Jiang Shangzhen has never been a soft-hearted master. As the Jiang family master who holds the blessed land of the Cloud Cave, his hands are covered with blood. Even if it is purely a monk, Jiang Shangzhen, who often goes out and travels, can be blamed if he talks about personal virtues. There are too many places. Probably this is a loss of personal morality and there is no lack of righteousness, so Jiang Shangzhen can have a clear conscience. To have a clear conscience is not selfishness. I will not move at any outsider's abuse. It is not a clear conscience. The older this kind of person is, the thicker the skin will be. The matter is here and the dust is settled. No one knows what Sun Yuan thought back then. Perhaps the only confidant is Jiang Shangzhen. Because he used to practice in Shen's Hufeng, Sun Yuan personally took him up the mountain, and later served as the genealogical sword repair of Zhenjingzong. So today the right of sway specially brought his disciple Cheng Chaolu to Zhang Fenggu and Wang Ji to give a few words about the past. For Sui right side, this is already extremely rare. After saying goodbye, Cheng Chaolu asked in a low voice, "Master, would you feel lost if you didn't become an official?" Sui smiled on the right and said, "Why do you think so?" Cheng Chaolu scratched her head. "Just ask casually." Sui asked on the right. "The master is neither the master of discipline nor the chief worshipper. The swordsmanship is not high yet. Follow me to practice swords and boxing. No matter how you look at it, it seems that you are not very productive. Would you feel disappointed?" Cheng Chaolu shook her head vigorously. "What's so disappointing about this?" Sui said on the right, "Qin Ping and Zhu Lian, Lu Baixiang, Wei Xian, and of course master's own unique boxing techniques. You have to learn with your heart. As for how much you can learn in the end, it's up to you to be determined and it's up to your fate." Cheng Chaolu wondered, "Can you learn the boxing technique of the hidden officer? Isn't it a steal? Isn't it a taboo?" Sui smiled on the right and said, "No." The second ceremony at Qingpingfeng Patriarch Hall was carried out step by step. Even after the celebration was over, the address of the Dadu excavation was actually chosen at Qingping Peak Patriarch Hall. This shows how much Qingping Jianzong attaches importance to this matter. In addition to Qingping Jianzong, Tapingshan Daquan Dynasty Pushun Yunkatang, there are Yuguizong, Zhang Fenggu, Wang Ji, Qiuji, Jiangheng. And Lu Jubao and Yu Panshui were invited, and Lu Yuzhou and Su Hao belonged to the audience. On Qingping Jianzong's side there are Qin Pingon, Changming Wei Wenlong, Pei Qian, and Xiao Imo Cui Dongshan Miyu Cui Wei Planting Autumn Chao Sunny. The only strange thing is that He Gu, a direct disciple of Miyu, and Yu Xiehui, a disciple of Zhang Lu Cui Wei, were also able to attend the meeting. Yu Panshui looked at Qin Pingon and his party on the opposite side and smiled. "Can I change my position? Yu Xiandushan and I are actually in the same group." Although there are many people on his side and the other side looks a little weak, in fact there are only a lot of house thieves in his own row. The young hidden official Ming and sect master Cui have a clear division of labor. One is responsible for deceiving the dog and the other is to kill the pig behind closed doors. Taiping Shan and Pushun must be accomplices. Afterwards, the matter of Dadu excavation was discussed for about an hour. Mainly Cui Dongshan, Yi Yunyun and Li Xiling talked a lot, and it took more than half an hour for the new backbone of Dadu. It is still not a real conclusion, because the various forces present here will all disagree with which section of the river they will be responsible for in the future. This is also normal. Both Yu Guizhong and Pu Shan must first go back to hold a meeting in their own patriarch hall. The Daquan dynasty will hold a huge court meeting and a small-scale meeting in the imperial study room. After King Pingfeng had at least finalized the major discussion that Tongyi's Hao will inevitably produce a new blasphemy. In the patriarch hall where Chao Qingqing closed the door, there was an extra old talent who made a madness. Shin Danshan's posture, stabilizing his figure, was much better than previously expected. He didn't sit directly on the ground. This old man who had finally gotten out of the Gongdalan of the Confucian temple turned around, folded his hands and looked at the portrait, twisting. He smiled and was proud, except for Zhou Xian who is a little bit off-hearted. None of my disciples are unsightly. They all follow the husband in their appearance. After all, when I was young I went out to buy a drink. To be beaten only the ant of the fish market is too much. It is too much. The crabs that sold us both lacked arms and legs back then, and they lied to me that they were very fresh. The old man walked to the chair that led him and stretched out his hand to support the back of the chair. As a husband he can shrink from the Gongdalan side and travel across continents. Can be so relaxed. Why, of course, is sitting in this chair. The student who went to school, this closed disciple, used all his merits, plus the merits of all the brothers, to carry their husbands and did one thing together. When the most sacred master returned to Gongdalan, a unicorn followed by his side. The master Jisheng made a special trip to pull up the Holy Spirit and Jingsheng sheeping, and had a drink with Lao Xiao and finally said that he remembered to let your closed disciple go for a trip to Tianwai. In the twilight, inside the house of Mi Xiefeng Cui Dongshan, a group of people sat around the furnace, slightly crowded. Qin Pingon millet grains. Peiqian Li Baoping. Chao Sunyi Jing Yugan. Only Cui Dongshan sits pitifully on a bench alone. Except for the millet grains, she does not belong to the family of Wenxing. The other 6 people, 2 generations, can almost be said to be the strictest sense of the same family. Qin Pingon and Cui Dongshan just took a short break from their busy schedule and took a short break here. There are still a lot of tasks waiting for them. Li Baoping said something. Back then he met Gu Kan at the Fox Country in Qingfeng City. Qin Pingon smiled and nodded as he listened to Li Baoping's narration. In the past, Qin Pingon had never mentioned it even on Lu Xianyang's side. For example, a young man in Mud Ping Alley who was an apprentice kiln worker. Every time he returned to Mu Ping Alley from the long kiln, he would go out to play with a little slug, and buy something that Gu Kan was usually greedy and could not eat. Once let the little slug sit on the neck, the child opened his hands and yelled to fly. The strawshoe boy laughed and galloped in an alley. As a result, a pedestrian appeared at the corner by accident, in order to avoid the other person. The boy had to scoot his body in a hurry. As a result, the slug's head hit the wall and burst into laughter. The boy squatted down and put the child on the ground. Soon a red and swollen bag appeared on the child's forehead, and bleeding streaks appeared on the child's forehead. In that scene the boy looked pale and colorless, his hands trembling, and he wanted to rub it with his palms a few times. As a result, when he just touched the wound, the child's crying became more heartbreaking and the chaotic boy hugged him. My child, I went to the roadside and found a few herbs, crushed them and chewed them up, carefully applied them to the child's wound, and then helped to wipe away the child's tears and snot. Repeatedly asked him if it hurts. The child worked hard. He sniffed his nose, squeezed a smile, hands on hips, and said that it hurts an egg. Then they went to Huda's bun shop. The boy paid for the bill, bought 2 meat buns. The little slug stood by, greedy. While subconsciously rubbing the swelling on his forehead, frowned, clenched his teeth without saying a word, just wiped off the 2 snots that were about to hang on his mouth indiscriminately, and the boy handed the 2 hot buns to the little slug. The child gave the boy a meat bun without saying a word, saying that he couldn't eat so much. The last one was walking down the street. The little slug shook his head and said that it was delicious and delicious. The best thing in the world was the meat buns from Aunt Huss' family. The teenager holding the other bun, holding the child in one hand, waited for the slug to finish the bun, and then passed the bun in his hand. The slug really didn't eat enough, so he broke the bun in half and filled the bun. Most of them are on the teenager's side. This time when they see the teenager eat, the child eats. While eating, he vaguely said, "Chin Ping'an, when I get rich in the future I will share half of all good things with you." Wait. When I grow up I must have a lot of money. What does it matter if I have copper in my pocket? There are a lot of gold and silver at home and I will save half of them for you. What I say is what counts. The strawshoe boy smiled and said okay. In fact, it didn't take it seriously. After all, the boy in Mud Bottle Alley and the little slug at that time, one only saw gold but never really touched silver, and the other might not have seen silver yet but only touched copper coins. After many years of leaving their homes and then waiting to meet again, the opening remarks were a slap in the face in full view. The slug who was beaten was still very happy. But the person who beat him was very sad. So no one knows why Mr. Xianxia Island accountant who left Shujian Lake later, on the way home after meeting that weird old gentleman, he would feel that if he had eaten 2 buns from Chishui City he would have strength. In argument, Qin Pingon put away his thoughts, lowered his head, picked up the iron tongs and gently fiddled with the charcoal in the basin. Only in an instant Qin Pingon and Cui Dongshan were almost at the same time, and they were the first to perceive the strangeness on the patriarch hall. The next moment the old scholar came outside the house with a bright smile, stretched out his hand and pressed twice. Sit. Our good.